Thank you very much. We haven't even said anything yet. If we are squinting, it's not because we're trying to, send a message. It's because of the sun. But there you go. Thank you very much for coming, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Artyom Les, and I'm the regional editor for Europe in the BBC World Service and the moderator of tonight's event. Before we start, just one quick housekeeping thing. I'm going to be really boring, and I'm going to have to ask you to put your mobile phones on silence. Right, okay. Tonight's event is being broadcast on the social media platforms of both Binary District and Strelka. And the theme today, as you can probably see from there, the theme is the future of digital transformation. This event opens a whole series of events, discussions on digital society, and each and every one of you can sign up to take part in those discussions, in those events. In order to do that, go to the website of Binary District, binarydistrict.com, and attendance is absolutely free. Before you rush to the website and start signing up, I need to say a few things about the organizers of the event. So first, Binary District. Binary District is based in Amsterdam. It's a collaborative tech community which conducts educational events, seminars, workshops, conferences on the new technologies. And these events have been held in such tech hubs around the world as Amsterdam, Berlin, London, and now in Moscow. The ultimate aim is to bring together the most forward-thinking names in tech in order to create a collaborative and a mutually beneficial platform for the exchange of knowledge, and then in turn for technological advancement. Strelka, which is hosting us today, is a non-governmental institution for people like you, really, for people with a background in design, in arts, in architecture, in social sciences. And it tries to create a basis for people who work with this institution, for people who attend its events, to develop their own creative energy. And then last but not least, the general partner of the summer series is Vostok. And Vostok has been described to me as the first blockchain platform for enterprise and public sector. The guests tonight, Jimmy Wales is the founder of Wikipedia and an internet entrepreneur. Sasha Ivanov is the founder and CEO of Waves platform and of Vostok project, which I've just mentioned. And once again, my name is Artyom Les. I'm the regional editor for Europe in the BBC World Service. Thank you. Right, a few words about how tonight is going to work. Each of us has a few things to say. We'll probably take about 10-15 minutes each. Then there will be a conversation, a discussion. Now, this discussion is never going to work without you guys, without your participation. So what we really want to see is we really want to see your questions, and if you do want to ask a question, then make yourself known, and there are people around the audience with microphones. They'll come over and they'll help you make yourself heard. After that event, Jimmy is going to deliver a lecture. The lecture is on the future of tech, and then after that, Jimmy, myself, and you are going to have a Q&A session here on this very stage. And we hope that tonight's event will finish at about 10 o'clock in the evening, but then we're not rushing. We'll take as long as we take, and the main purpose is that it remains interesting and exciting. With this, I'll hand over to Sasha for Sasha's 10-minute thoughts.
Thank you very much, Artem, for the great introduction. I'm going to be speaking Russian, actually, because I think it makes more sense with the audience. So, мы пришли поговорить о цифровой трансформации. На самом деле, да, эта серия ивентов посвящена ей. Достаточно абстрактный концепт. Хотелось бы понять, насколько люди понимают, что такое цифровая трансформация.
Whether you understand digital transformation or not. Show hands those of you who thinks that you know what is digital transformation.
Но это, наверное, как бы
Well,
5%.
that's
С
5%,
другой
give or
стороны, в
take.
России даже есть программа
On the other
цифровой
hand, we
трансформации,
actually have a public and
принятая
governmental
на уровне
program
правительства,
on
и в
digital
2024
transformation that was
году,
adopted, I
всё должно
think,
быть
this year
оцифровано.
by
Очень странно, поэтому
2024, that
поймем,
all
что
information
цифровая
has to be
трансформация,
digitalized. So let's
с точки
all of us
зрения
wrap
людей, которые
our
ей
minds
занимаются,
around
да,
this
я считаю,
concept.
что
Like,
здесь
what's it about?
есть много интересных
I believe
вещей,
it's a very
очень
interesting
нетривиальных, да,
concept.
и
It's non-trivial,
не так все просто, как
and it's
может
not very
показаться, на
simple
самом
as
деле.
it may seem at first.
Мы все видим, что
So all of us
общество очень быстро
see
меняется.
that the
Все
society
присутствующие,
changes
я
at
думаю,
an
многие
alarming
присутствующие,
rate. All of us
родились
have
в одном
noticed
мире, а
that you
живут
were
уже в
born
другом.
in one world and now we're living in a different world. For example, me, I sent my first email when I was 20 years old.
И сейчас, с другой стороны,
So
дети,
now,
они
on the other hand,
уже
my
как бы с
children,
малых детей
starting from a very early age, they are present in digital world, and it's no wonder if you give your child a present as iPad instead of a fire truck, right? So that's all very natural to us, as it seems. And what's interesting is the main driver of all of this, of what we see around us, is of course the internet itself.
Давайте немножко
Now let me
позволит
give you
нам
some
понять,
examples
насколько быстро
so
всё
you can
меняется,
understand
куда мы
how
идем,
quickly it
и
actually
что-
changes and
к чему мы можем прийти.
what's our
Это
path
такое как бы
may lead
немножко
to.
отступление, которое призвано
So this is
объяснить,
I'm going to
что
digress a little bit just to
настолько всё
explain
быстро меняется,
that
что
everything
если мы
changes so
находимся внутри
quickly
каких-то
that
изменений,
if,
мы
for
даже можем
example,
их
we
не
are
заметить.
present in
Нужно
some
немножко
changes, you
отстраниться,
cannot even notice
посмотреть
them.
на них
You
со
have to
стороны,
take a step back,
и
take
тогда
a look
мы
at the
увидим
bigger picture,
как бы
and then you
более
can see
большую картину происходящего.
the overview look, from the
Есть
bird's eye
такая
view, so
теория
to speak.
шесть
So there's a
рукопожатий.
theory
Я думаю,
of
многие из
6
присутствующих
handshakes.
знают её,
I
да?
think that the majority
Она
of
очень
you
проста,
are familiar with it.
она
It's very
достаточно
simple.
как бы
It's
неинтуитивна.
it's very
Она говорит,
intuitive.
что вы можете
It says
связаться с
that
любым человеком на земле, там, будь то
you may
Дональд Трамп
connect
или
to any
какой-нибудь
person in the
крестьянин в
world, for
Китае,
example,
через
a Chinese
цепочку
farmer
6
or Donald
посредников.
Trump, through a chain of
На
6
самом деле,
other
как бы это
people.
казалось бы странная идея, но она
I
была
think
проверена экспериментально.
from the first view,
Она была
from the first
высказана
glance, it
Стивеном
may seem a
Юнгом
little
в
bit weird,
50-х годах.
but it was actually
И он
proven by
проверил
scientists in
экспериментально. Он действительно рассылал
1950s.
посылки по Америке.
American scientists, he sent the parcels
Translation.
across the
Он
United
рассылал посылки
States.
по Америке и просил
So he sent the
получателей
parcels
переслать
across the
посылку
United States,
данному
and he
человеку.
asks a person
действительно
to
оказалось,
pass these
что
parcels along. So
цепочка из
it actually
получателей
turned
была
out that
всего
the
лишь 6
chain
шагов.
was about 6 steps
И,
long.
в принципе, это
And,
такой
well, basically,
стандартный
it's
параметр
quite a standard
человеческого
parameter
общества до
of
интернета.
human society before the
И
internet
человечество
came
жило
to
в
be.
этих условиях
And the
тысячелетиями,
humanity lived in
когда
these
вы могли
conditions for
познакомиться с любым человеком через 6
millennia.
рукопожатий.
For example, you can meet
Есть
anybody through
эмпирическое
6
обоснование
handshakes.
этому,
It's
есть
actually
экспериментальное.
has
Потом
been
появился
proven by
интернет.
science.
Когда
But
он
now
появился,
we got
все
the
стали
internet, and
смотреть, как
when
бы,
we
а
got the
сколько же
internet, we can
рукопожатий
take
в
a look at
интернете,
how
через
many
сколько
handshakes we need,
прыжков мы можем
how many
перейти
leaps
от одного
we
интернет-пользователя
need
к
to
другому.
take to
Что
move
характерно,
from
в
one
начале
user to another. And what's
появления
interesting
интернета,
about
это
this is
конец
after
90-х.
the onset of the
Действительно,
internet
количество
and
рукопожатий,
the surge of the
degrees
internet
of separation, как говорят по-английски, было равно
90s,
6.
and these
Люди отсылали имейлы,
degrees of separation was about 6. So you send an email and you can find any user in 6 other emails. But then we got the internet even broader. So now we can actually gauge this degree of separation on Facebook. So in 2008, the Facebook states itself that the degree of separation was 5.28. In 2011, degree of separation was 4.74, and in 2016 the degree of separation was 4.57. And now you can reach Mark Zuckerberg in just 3 steps, or to CEO of Sheryl Sandberg in less than 3 steps. That's very interesting. That this fundamental parameter it characterizes the entire society, and this change means something. So what does that mean? We can have 2 scenarios here. It's either the change of the communication system itself, or we are changing it in quantity. I think that the structure of communication itself is not really that different from our real world. You just happen to have more friends in your friend list. You have way more friends than, for example, your parents have had in their real life. It seemed very trivial at first, right? So, I mean, big whoop, you have more friends. But I think all of you have read the book A Brief History of Humanity. quite interesting read. I think it's one of the masterpieces of popular science, and the first chapter actually describes the development of human society from the group of gatherers to a group of farmers. You know, the gatherers, it was a group of less than 100 people, and the structure was very horizontal, and it's no wonder, because a person evolved in a way that he cannot have more than 100 active social ties, so you cannot have more than 100 people in your active memory. And that's a quite, you know, a heavy constant that was before, because usually a person before has had less than 100 friends, but now on Facebook you might have as well as up to 500. So after the creation of social network, it changed dramatically not just the structure of the society, but it changes individuals themselves, because we have to maintain more memory in our mind. The brain changes, our perception of social ties also changes, our psychodynamics also changes. So the internet doesn't just change society, but individual peoples as well. And that's very serious, because it actually speaks more about evolution at this point, because you know, we're moving forward, and the internet and these social evolutions, they lead to evolution on global scale, and that's pretty cool, I think. Let's try to understand where the internet may lead us to. I mean, what's the end game of our transformation? You can actually recall a quote from Tim Berners-Lee. I think he's one of the founding fathers of the internet, because he established the Web 1.0 concept, and then he proposed the Web 3.0. Actually, he's going to appear on one of our events. That's going to be pretty cool, because one of the ideas that he said at the start of the century is now gaining, you know, a new momentum. So this idea is very interesting. So the quote is, there is the idea that society can run without a hierarchical, bureaucratic government being involved at every step, if only we can hit on the right set of rules for peer-to-peer interaction. So I think this means that in the future we might have new protocols for social interactions. So let me try to give you a brief overview of what's going to happen next. I mean, what's the internet is being the harbinger of. Let's first recall all generations of the internet. I think this is not very widely known, so let's recall that a little bit. So Tim Berners-Lee, he established Web 1.0. He called it just a collection of documents that was, you know, connected to each other, linked to each other. It was a quite decentralized web, actually. You know, it was decentralized. There was no hierarchy. It was, you know, DNS servers, but there was no one singular universal archive. There was no group of people. It was just a network of independent agents. The internet that we're living now, it's called Web 2.0. It's internet corporations, it's the internet of Facebook, internet of Google, it's the internet of corporations. So now we got some interactions in our internet, and it's organized in a way that it duplicates the interactions that we have in our society, in our real society. So we also have corporations, we also have vertical structures, and Web 2.0 just plain copied it. That's why we see Facebook, that's why we see Google, and that's why we got problems that are also related to this vertical structure. You know, being in Russia, we had some issues about Cambridge Analytics and, you know, the news related to that thing. So Web 2.0 can be manipulated, can be banned, so it has to change. So, and how can it be changed? You know, it was also said by Tim Berners-Lee. He explained the concept of Web 3.0. It's the next generation, which we are on the on the onset about. It's a web that lives by protocols that were imprinted on it. And not just people, but robots can actually live on the internet, and they just interact based on the protocols that were written in this web initially. So how can this web can be created actually? I shall remind you that this idea was pushed by Tim at the start of the century, and they lacked one element for the establishment of this web. Sorry? Oh.
Sorry.
Right.
They lack the decentralization
tool. In Web 3.0 we got robots and humans that interact with each other based on the rules. And you cannot bend or break those rules because they are encrypted in the web. So we established semantic web. So, we basically got a protocol language and you speak that language and everybody does. And it is accepted by all participants of this network and it allows us to interact without the participation of some agents. And I should tell you that Tim actually spoke about blockchain before the blockchain actually happened to be. He first mentioned it in 2009. He said that there's going to be a fifth element, a quintessential element that will allow us to move on from corporation internet to robot internet to Web 3.0. So we're going back to basics, to Web 1.0. It's decentralization, it's independence, it's the lack of some institutions that can manage or control or ban something. So Web 3.0, that's coming now. It's not just going to be just blockchain. It's just going to be a collection of knowledge, collection of technologies, a sum of technologies. It will have blockchain, machine learning, AI, Internet of Things, big data, augmented reality, all the combination of that, they will lead to a world that's basically will work based on the rules that were written on the creation of this web. And based on the development of the internet, we see that the society moves towards something greater that we have now, basically. So the internet and its development is just a harbinger of more serious changes that will come in our future. So Web 3.0, we will move on next to digital society. So it's a society that generalizes all the people in the Web 3.0, where all the social interactions will be interchangeable with technical interactions. So, for example, some things, some social interactions can be switched by technical protocols, actually. Just like in the blockchain, we got consensus, where all the miners, they agree on transactions. Just the same we got in this society. We got agreements, we got protocols. So this is what's going to happen. Social agreement will be substituted with the technological one. We will establish systems that will not be able to corrupt because they are incorruptible, technically speaking. And from our point of view, we are implementing these projects. It's not just a philosophy, we're actually doing this. This is the essence of the transformation. This is the essence of substitution of all the faulty social interactions with proven technological ones. And I think that's a great goal to pursue. So I believe that we will enter a society that will drastically be different from what we have now. So the idea of replacing social consensus with technical consensus is quite new. I wanted to emphasize it in my presentation because, we see systems that require, some central stakeholder. It's not mandatory. It's optional. We should have some central department that may solve some problems that may arise during the interactions of big groups of people. So we got this element of corruption. So using this registries and technologies, we can imprint a protocol of interaction at the level of technical protocol, thus moving our legal laws to basically natural laws that will be followed by default. And, social consensus can be moved on to basically brought down to basically laws of physics. It's just going to work like that, and you can't corrupt them or you can't circumvent them because it's impossible. Sounds very abstract, but still, we are doing lots of practical things as well. And the idea of my presentation is that even now, we got some things that this is real, this is happening. There are prototypes of things that will come. to our world after what we have now. For example, here are two examples to me and based on my background. So the system that works in a way that social consensus is replaced by a technical one. I'll give an example. Sure, you can actually collect taxes on the blockchain. You can get a payment system that's going to be supported by the government, and all transactions can be done in this blockchain system. And there is no room for corruption, right? Because there is a transaction, there is an address that you just, wire VAT taxes, and it automatically moves on to a treasury house, with some central address. And again, it solves the issue of collecting taxes because it's just, they are now collected based on protocols. And instead of social consensus, some department, some tangible, physical department, like tax department or ministry, we don't need it anymore because, it's uncorruptible. That sounds abstract, sure, but it actually works in several systems. There's a cryptocurrency such as Zcash that is actually based like this. There is a foundation protocol that encrypted in a way that miners pay 20% fee, I think, of their profits to Zcash Foundation. And Zcash Foundation actually develops this cryptocurrency. So it actually works right now. It acts as a prototype of more bigger, more serious systems. And for example, in 100 meters of you, there is a primal base office. It's a co-working chain that works based on cryptocurrency, based on tokens. They crowdfunded $7 million, and they have got offices in Berlin and New York, and now they have one in Moscow. So what's happening? This is tokenization of any asset, basically. Previously, we had the financial market that was tied to equity, to some stocks, to some shares, but tokenization speaks that we can tokenize anything, really, all values, all assets. We can tokenize some commodities like precious metals, oil, works of art, or intellectual property. Because it's cheap, it doesn't require any sort of middleman or regulator. We can tokenize anything, really. We can digitalize and tokenize the entire world around us. So what Primal Base is doing, they are tokenizing the membership in their co-working. So you purchase their token and you get an access to any of the locations from their chain. So this is the project that is now working. You can procure their token, and I think in September you can rent your own office, at this wonderful embankment. You can work here, man. I mean, it works. It works in Moscow. It works nearby us. It's not just an abstract concept. It's here, and it's here to stay. And it says that these abstract things, they're quite real, and it's gonna come. More examples we can see in history, where the most abstract pieces of technology became real. Like cryptocurrency, for example, it was based on the theory of numbers, and theory of numbers was very abstract back then, but now it's one of the most practical ones. So a small summary, just to take out from this, and just to reiterate. So the internet is something that changes the world, basically. And based on the changes on the internet, it dictates of what's happening in the society. So now it's going toward the direction of decentralization. And this is actually the course for our entire society and our humanity. Instead of centralized agents, we are decentralizing, substituting social consensus with technical one. And basically, in the world that we see around us, there are examples of that it's gonna happen. It's not just an abstract thing, and we should fight for. And then the world that we are going to live and our kids will live will be drastically different from where we're living right now. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Sasha, thank you very much. Jimmy, over to you.
Спасибо.
Very good, thank you. Well, because I'm going to be giving a proper lecture in a little bit, and I don't want to take away from the things I'll be saying there, I'll keep my remarks now fairly brief. When we think about the future of digital transformation, I think we should understand that already in the last 30 years or so, we've been through an enormous amount of transformation in societies, an enormous amount of transformation in the way we use technology, the way we relate to technology. Everyone here has their smartphone and is instantly connected to the universe of knowledge and information. And that has led to a lot of other impacts that no one really foresaw necessarily. Maybe a few people did, but we think of the transformation of work around going from a lot of chauffeur hire companies to a highly distributed system of Uber and similar services. And all of these kinds of changes are still going on. There's still a lot of things to come. And I think that one of the things that we should remember is that these transformations are going to be very, very bumpy in some cases. That the transformations to come, many of them are going to have really dramatic impacts on a lot of industries and a lot of employment, that people have become very used to the idea of how a certain thing works, and this is going to change dramatically. So one of my favorite and one of the easiest examples is as we move towards increasingly autonomous vehicles, so cars that can drive themselves, or more importantly, in the short run, long-haul truck driving is really poised for an incredibly dramatic transformation, and millions of jobs are going to disappear very, very quickly. And then we'll have all of those people whose job has been driving a truck, and they suddenly won't have that job anymore. And they aren't generally very well prepared for other professions or other jobs. And I think in many cases our education system and our governments are really a little bit asleep to what was going to happen. And we aren't investing in the transition, in the human capital that we're going to need for that transition, which is going to lead to a lot of very unhappy people. I mean, one of the things that we are seeing all around the world, we've seen this very dramatically in the US and in part in Europe. People who are voting in surprising ways, in new ways, because they are unhappy. They feel that they are being left behind, that this digital transformation, while undoubtedly a good thing for the world and for everyone, hasn't been so good for them. And if they feel like, hey, the only thing this has really brought me is it destroyed my job, they're not going to be happy, and they're going to vote for things that may not actually solve their problems, because their problems are much more fundamentally long-term about the changes in the world that are coming from technology, and not about this or that policy of today. So I think that one of the things that everybody should be thinking about when we hear about disruptions yet to come is thinking about, well, how do we work to make sure that these transformations are actually helpful for everyone? I'm a little skeptical about the idea of replacing social consensus with technical consensus, at least for many aspects of things, because it's human beings who have to make these decisions, and we have to come to some consensus around technology and around what will happen in the future. Otherwise, we're going to see a lot of really quite dangerous politics come up. The politics of, the internet is naturally a unifying force for human beings on the planet. Like, we're all here, we have the same kind of access to knowledge and information, we can communicate with each other. When I was growing up in the 1970s, Russia was a complete mystery to us, right? It was completely the Cold War, and it was a completely alien, foreign concept. And now I come to Russia and I was, oh, okay, Russians, they're very much like everyone else all around the world. And we all know this through the internet, because we have the ability to access information everywhere. And yet, at the same time, we're seeing political trends that are not about that kind of unified idea that, hey, we're all human beings on the planet. We're seeing transformations that are around, Donald Trump is talking about building a wall because it's about foreigners and blaming other people for problems, rather than saying, actually, we've got a real problem with digital transformation and transitions to economies that aren't going to be solved by hating foreigners. They're going to be solved by actually coming to some new arrangements and new understandings. So there's a lot to talk about.
Indeed there is. Thank you, Jimmy. I just want to add a few things, picking up perhaps on what you said, Sasha, about how rapidly the world is changing. I'll give you two sort of comparisons. 2008, the highest valued public companies in the world were ExxonMobil, PetroChina, ICBC is a Chinese bank, China Mobile, and Microsoft. 2018, Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, perhaps better known to us as Google, Microsoft and Facebook. So we've gone from a society based on, if you look purely at market value, a society based on petrochemicals and oil and gas and a bit of banking, a bit of mobile, to a society which is purely tech. It's a radical shift. If you look back at 1999, 10 years before 2008, yes, the composition was different. You didn't have China Mobile or you didn't have ICBC in this top list. But what you did have was you had petrochemicals and you had a bit of industry and you had a bit of big pharma. And one outlier was Microsoft, who was already one of the top most valued companies in the world back in 1999. What we don't know, what indeed we have no way of knowing at all, is what this list will look like in 2028. This list is pulled together by the Financial Times. And, I'm a journalist, I hold Financial Times very, very dear to my heart, but I don't know that the Financial Times will still exist in 2028. It's a world where the speed of change is such that we struggle to keep up. I remember a year ago, maybe 18 months ago, a lot of clever people who know a lot about journalism and how you sort of sell journalism to the public were saying to us, look, you absolutely need to be on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook, if your journalism is not on Facebook, then you're not worth your salt. And then you know what? Facebook decides we're not interested in the news anymore, we'll switch off the tap. And some of my colleagues in Serbia, as a nation, they were the first place where Facebook changed their algorithm and went from an algorithm based broadly on news to an algorithm based on human interests. Some of the Serbian media organizations lost 60% of their audience overnight. 60%. So we find it very difficult to adjust to the speed of change, but there are people who are at the forefront of that change. I did a quick search on Google, as one does, about who is more powerful than the President of the United States. Here are some headlines from places like the Forbes, the Guardian, Vice, the Atlantic, and the number of websites based within what in Washington people call the Beltway, based in the kind of inner circle of American politics. Do we really want to run the world? Such and such versus the president. Why would such and such run for the White House? He's already more powerful than the president will ever be. Now, the person whose name I'm not mentioning in these headlines is, of course, Mark Zuckerberg. And this is all before the Cambridge Analytica scandal. I imagine things may have shifted a bit since then. But if we accept the proposal that people like him are more powerful than the American president, then, we'd better hope that he means well. Because if he doesn't, then we're in deep trouble. Curiously, there's a vacancy on Facebook, which I'll read you a bit from the job ad. So the vacancy says, the successful candidate, whoever is hired, will work in the programs team, which is responsible for designing, developing, and launching global programs which leverage the extraordinary reach on Facebook in order to promote positive economic and social impact. So Facebook knows what the word positive means, but they're not necessarily telling us, are they? When Larry Page and Sergey Brin published their original shareholder letter when Google was first being launched, they said, we believe strongly that in the long term, we will be better served by a company which does good things for the world. Again, what was missing from that letter was an explanation of what is meant by good things for the world. So A, we don't know that people who run the 5 most powerful tech companies in the world agree between themselves what good is. B, we don't know what they mean by good, and I would argue that we have very few ways in which we can influence their perception of what good is. Now, a lot of these technological behemoths are based on a philosophy, on an ideology of libertarianism. There's a very famous writer called Ayn Rand, who is incidentally Russian, by origin. And in one of her works, in The Fountainhead, there's a very famous quote. The question is not who is going to let me, do whatever. The question is who is going to stop me. So they power along. We are standing by the sidelines and we're watching them power along. You can look at it from two perspectives. You can look at it from the perspective of the Neo-Luddites, and the Neo-Luddites are an actual movement which started in America. There's a paper called by an author called Chellis Glendinning, and the paper calls for, and I quote, citizens, activists, workers, neighbors, social critics, and scholars to question the predominant modern worldview which preaches that technology represents progress. So that's one extreme. The other extreme, arguably, is to say, look, let's enjoy the ride. Let's enjoy the benefits of everything that big tech has given us. Again, as a journalist, I found out the other day that the commissioning budget of Netflix is twice as big as the entire budget of the BBC. You'd have to say that this is a good thing because it fosters creativity, but it does come, to me, it comes with quite a lot of baggage. So, BBC is an impartial broadcaster. I don't have a position on this. But what I do want to ask both Sasha and Jimmy is, how can these questions be answered? Is there a way in which the growth of tech and the way in which the world of tech is changing the offline world, does it need to be controlled by anybody? And can it indeed be controlled by anybody? Sasha, do you want to start?
Sure. Actually, everybody understands that at a certain stage of development, it has to be centralized to a certain extent. So you can't do without centralization at all. So my idea about the replacing of social consensus with technical one doesn't work like that. So you just replace something which is already in place with a technical solution. You have to actually agree on some kind of terms, on some kind of rules, and then you implement this technically. So for this part of the process, for this stage, you need to have some kind of central authority, some kind of maybe benevolent dictator or something like that. It has to be. Otherwise, it's quite hard to come up with a protocol which is going to allow you to move to a totally decentralized and like trustless system. So at a certain stage of development, you do need some kind of centralization. You do need some kind of like centralized will, which is going to implement some changes. But after it's done, you are good, we're good to go, and we can actually use the benefits of decentralization, which are implemented right into the fabric of our reality. I think it's quite doable, and of course there is a slow transition toward that. You can't just move into that direction in a very fast way. You have to go through several stages.
Jimmy, you said you were skeptical about the concept as such, didn't you? Why? And why do you think it might not work?
Well, I mean, I just think it's very easy to design a protocol or a system that is quite brittle and doesn't actually have the flexibility needed to resolve problems. I mean, one of the things that we talk about in the world of Wikipedia is we say ignore all rules, and that doesn't mean that we believe in anarchy. It just means if you see a way to make Wikipedia better and some rule seems to say that you can't, then we should challenge those rules and we should change those rules and we should adapt as we learn new things. And that's easy to do if you're talking about human beings in a thoughtful dialogue and discussion and debate. It's much harder to do if it's baked into the deep protocols of things. So on this broader question, I think it's very hard. The number of different elements to what does it mean, the impact of technology on society and on life, there are millions of elements of that, and it's very hard to imagine even the possibility of what would centralized decision making around stopping that look like, short of a complete totalitarian state, which no one is in favor of, and which we're no closer than, I mean, it's impossible to implement, even if we thought it was a good idea. Other than that, I think we're left in a way of saying, actually what we do need is open dialogue, discussion, debate, looking at real problems as they arrive, thinking of solutions that are meaningful without being heavy-handed. One of the biggest problems that I think we have around this sort of thing is that politicians typically don't know very much about technology. They haven't thought very much in a systematic way about what does it mean to have decentralized systems like Facebook communities, which is decentralized in one sense, but obviously very centralized in Facebook in another sense. And without that kind of thinking, they're very likely to propose solutions that actually don't solve the problems that people actually have and that aren't very useful. So, and I don't have a solution to that. You know, how do we make politicians be smarter? That's a very tough problem because they have a lot of incentives to, you know, go with what's popular or you know, it's quite easy to say, oh dear, there's a problem with fake news. Facebook should do something about it. Whereas in a slightly different set of historical circumstances, if Facebook had announced 5 years ago, we're going to start deciding for you which news is good quality and which isn't, we would all freak out, and quite rightly, that why is it up to Facebook to decide which news is good or not? That's not a good idea. And yet, people are calling on them to do exactly that, which is problematic. So,
curiously, the latest Reuters digital news report cited a statistic where they did a poll across Europe and asked people across Europe who should sort out fake news. Should it be the government, should it be the platform, or should it be the media? And people overwhelmingly said it should be the media. But going back to what you said about regulation, indeed, when the government tries to regulate, a lot of the time it looks a bit like what you know, teenagers call dead dancing. And one example here in Russia is Roskomnadzor and Telegram. Who here uses Telegram? Right, there we go. It's banned in Russia. Jimmy, in case you didn't know.
right.
So, Sasha, how do you solve this riddle? How do you solve the riddle of, on the one hand, as Jimmy says, and as you agree, you have to have somebody thinking, you have to have somebody regulating. But on the other hand, the thinkers and the regulators tend to be slow to catch up, and they tend to be lagging behind the technological development. Or is this riddle unsolvable?
Me?
Well, I was after Sasha, but actually, regulators, it's a very tough task for them and a very tall order, I think. So, for example, fake news, nobody knows how you can fight this. Nobody can come up with some kind of a technical solution. For example, Elon Musk proposed something, but I don't think it's gonna work. It's mostly for marketing and public relations. So it's a very different, it's a very difficult actually question how regulators should behave in this environment. I think that technology actually always somehow is ahead of governments. So as you can see with blockchain, they're really lagging behind, and they understand that, and they are ready to talk to the industry in order to understand how they can actually have some laws that won't kill the industry completely. So it's a difficult question. Basically, everybody is like human, so you have to talk to people in the government because, after all, they are humans as well. Yeah.
Are they willing to listen?
Huh?
Are they willing to listen?
Yeah, most of the time they are willing to listen because, as I said, basically you don't have to separate yourself too much from the government because they're also human. They're the same human beings as you are, so you don't have to forget that. And you always can connect, you can relate to them, you have some common ground, and you have to bring your point over, and probably they will listen after all. So I don't think, there has to be some interaction between the government and ourselves before the world is completely decentralized and technical consensus replaces the social one.
Jimmy, you had one more thought at least.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to be an optimist, and so one of the things I think we should remember is that human beings and communities are quite resilient. So 2 years ago, you might despair that the changes in the business models around journalism have made it very hard to do quality journalism. No one's paying for news, so it's all ad-driven, and that leads to the wrong incentives for publishers, etc. And then we suddenly see that the New York Times, their digital subscriptions have gone from 1 million to 3 million in a couple of years' time, because the public, they aren't happy when they, if you think they only want clickbait headlines and fluffy news, of course that's always a little bit popular. People like to see what Kim Kardashian's doing or whatever it might be, useless, but they also want serious information, and they will pay for it when the opportunity arises and when people understand, hey, there's a real problem here, we're not getting quality news, we need to do something different. And so I think that we'll muddle through, we always have.
Indeed. I want to throw open to the audience. We've got a question just there in the middle. Is there anybody with a microphone? I think you had your hand up for quite some time.
Good evening, my name is Dmitry. Will speak Russian, excuse me. Скажите, пожалуйста.
Can you tell me, please?
Вот говорилось о замене
You were telling about substituting social consensus with a technical one. Is that actually possible?
Потому что кажется,
because to my mind it seems that social transaction, it implies that nobody owes anybody, but the society leads, you know, to this social agreement. So if you want to negotiate some law about bicycle riders, you know, they have a dedicated lane, for example, now, and, you know, everybody agrees. So there's the term of anonymity, you know, it's not a law, but it's a social agreement. That's all bike riders, they ride the dedicated lane. But if we change that to a technical consensus, then it means that it requires our signature, our actual vote. So it can be actually all traced, and then it can lead to some sanctions or some mistrust. For example, like my family, some of my family, they like communists, and some of them, they vote Democrats. This is my opinion in terms of that I can't see, you know, technical consensus substituting social consensus 100%. And in terms of how the technical progress will be implemented, I have a good example. We have Bitcoin, we got blockchain, everything was fine and dandy, but, you know, as a man with financial background, I was monitoring Bitcoin as a substitute to a currency. You know, it's a universal currency, cool. But the hype that was formed around this issue, it actually killed the idea. So on the example of Bitcoin, we can see how the society, and, you know, the people, they generate some sort of immunity that allows us being unable to, you know, implement any idea very quickly to our social conditions. And if it's going to happen, it's going to be gradually, not instantly.
Can I ask you to summarize and to put it as a question? Because these are very interesting thoughts, but I think it'll be perhaps slightly simpler if you were to formulate it as a question.
Excuse me, it's only my opinion.
Okay,
it's discussion. It's my opinion. Thank you. Excuse me.
Do you guys want to add anything?
Может, я скажу про...
Yeah, I can say about social consensus.
У нас же есть Конституция, например.
Right, so we got the Constitution, right? It's a book of laws that decides that we are going to live this way. So we drafted it, we printed it, we adopted it, right? And, you know, to simplify things, it can be applied to blockchain. We can make a blockchain constitution, not like a social consensus, but we call it technical one, that it works like my example with taxes, that they are, you know, deducted automatically. You know, you can't, you know, avoid paying taxes because it's done automatically. Of course, it will require some time, it's not going to happen instantly, but some of the stages, I think, can be seen now.
Okay, I think there was a gentleman there. Yes.
Я думаю, да, кто-то там вот был, да, вы.
Gentlemen, one question.
Yes.
I speak first English and then Russian. At the digital transformation of humankind, would we expect life expectancy to increase as general? And the second part, if you're going to digital society, can we count on coefficient like life efforts versus result achieved? Like easiness of life, would it decrease, increase in human living digital society, or what would we expect? Значит, мой вопрос в том, что, Всеволод Садохин, мой вопрос в том, что переход в эру цифрового человечества повлечет ли за собой в среднем увеличение продолжительности жизни? И другая вещь — это если мы оцифровываем все, можем ли оцифровать что-то вроде коэффициента легкости бытия, то есть наши жизненные усилия на полученный результат. И возрастет ли он или упадет?
Will we live longer and will we live better?
Yes, I think both. I think there are some technologies that are very, very exciting in this area. So things like CRISPR gene editing technology has a real opportunity to make, for the first time, really breakthrough progress on a lot of cancer diseases, a lot of other diseases. And I think that's really huge, and that's coming very, very quickly. And that, combined with the ongoing increase in deep learning, AI, machine learning, means that we'll make discoveries in this area much faster. We'll be able to process a lot more ideas faster. And I think that's going to lead to both an extension of life, but probably as important is an extension of healthy, usable life. Certainly, if we have technologies that keep very old and very sick people alive for 10 more years, okay, well, this is good for those people, that's fine, but actually what we really want to say is, if I'm as fit as I am now, which is not very fit from an athletic point of view, when I'm 90 years old and just as functional as I am today, that's really huge, that's important. Even if I die at 91, I'd rather be healthy till 91 and happy than suffering in those last years. So I think technology has a lot to offer in this area, and we're going to see a lot of breakthroughs coming soon. And I think AI is going to play a huge and important part of that.
To go back to my point, when the oldest living woman in the world was interviewed a few years ago in Japan, she was asked, what's your biggest wish? What do you want to happen to you? And she said, I want to die. That's the only thing I want. So there you go. Any more? Yes, over there, please.
Задать вопрос. Всем привет.
I have a question. Hello, my name is Ruslan. Thank you for the lecture. I have a question to Alexander. Alexander, I visited your conference, Future in Tech, in Moscow. You also gave a speech that was very cool. Thank you. And you said that, Waves will compete with Ethereum, and that happened. So my question is, I'm a simple investor, it's all very hype, but what's the difference between these currencies? They're all growing, only if the expectations are high. And I believe that now tokens only exist if they have a huge hype around them. Why do you think you're different from that? There are a lot of smart contracts already, and they have destabilized things. As an investor, you have to woo me.
Investment speech in 10 seconds. Go.
Okay, we're talking about different things here, I don't want to, stem away and digress from our original discussion and discuss the price of tokens, but let's talk about blockchain for a moment there. It became obvious that it shouldn't be just CO and the transfer of Bitcoin money. The future is for cloud, the future is for using such technologies in public sector and big businesses, and that's what we're doing now. And the scenario with the blockchain is just about to start, and everything that was before, it was just a preliminary stage. So the biggest things will happen this year, including monetary elements.
The lady there, excuse me, the lady there.
Check. Yes, hello, I'm sorry, I will speak Russian. We prepared a small present for our guest from Formal.com and Silicon Valley One projects. We want to give him a domain with the worth of 40 million rubles, Wikipedia.one. We will give it to you as a gift. This is a gift from Russian developers and our community. There you go. Thank you. Спасибо большое.
Okay, let's come to the lady there. Thank you very much for that. Let's come to the lady there.
Hi everyone, it's really great to have you with us tonight. My question is for Jimmy Wales. We have known Wikipedia for many years already, we know how it works, but due to this cifrovization, how do you see some other ways of transformation of Wikipedia? What's next for it?
Well, Wikipedia is very stable today, and so when I think about the future of Wikipedia, I really think in two ways. One way, most people won't notice, and one way people will. So, the way that people won't notice is that Wikipedia is now beginning to have really strong growth in some of the languages of the developing world, and as the next billion people come online. In places that traditionally have been very information poor as well as being actually in poverty, they will be building Wikipedia in their own languages, which of course, if you're speaking English and Russian, you may not notice what's going on in Zulu Wikipedia or whatever, but that is a huge part of the future for us. And I actually think it's where we're going to have our biggest social impact, and it's going to be an impact that's very different. So in Western societies, the main purpose we've had is, okay, you think of some topic and you say, oh, blockchain, everyone's talking about blockchain, but I don't know much about it. So you go to Wikipedia and you read. But if you just Google blockchain, you get 50 million websites, and we bring all that together for you. Whereas in many parts of the world, in many languages of the world, they have almost no access to information. It'll be the first time they can actually get access to information, which is a different purpose, and it is very important. In terms of the changes that I think you will see, we're constantly improving the interface to make it more accessible for more people to be able to edit. It's always been too technical, and so we have inadvertently prevented people from participating in the world of Wikipedia, not because they don't have knowledge that they could share, but because they aren't computer programmers, and learning wiki markup language is a challenge. And so making the editing interface much more human-centric is going to be a big change. But we're not planning to do anything crazy. We're not going to become YouTube, and we're not going on the blockchain or anything like that.
We've got time for 2 more questions, and I'd really like for them to come from the ladies. So you, please.
Mr. Jimmy, I have a question to you. So you said about, fighting the fake news. And in regards to Wikipedia, Wikipedia, one way or another, is actually one of the hot pockets of fake information. What do you do with that? How do you fight it?
So what we find is that the best academic studies of the quality of Wikipedia show that the quality is very similar to traditional encyclopedias. And in fact, the phenomenon of true fake news, not what Donald Trump says is fake news, which is anything he disagrees with, but the true fake news has had almost zero impact at Wikipedia. Because the Wikipedia community, they spend their time worrying about the quality of sources and debating and really struggling to see, can we find the accurate information? How do we present it accurately? Of course it's imperfect. Any human activity is imperfect. But the classic example of fake news, there was a headline that went viral during the US presidential election that said, the Pope endorses Trump. It was shared thousands and thousands of times. It was from a completely fake source. But of course, this wouldn't make its way into Wikipedia, not even for 5 seconds, because the Wikipedia community would say, okay, wait a minute, the Pope never endorses a political candidate, and this particular Pope is quite left-wing and doesn't seem like he would like Trump at all. They're very different. And then, of course, if it were true, it would be on the front page of every newspaper in the world. And so the Wikipedia community is very different from random people on Facebook or Twitter who just share something they think is alarming or interesting or whatever. They actually pause and reflect and say, oh, is this valid or not? Of course, that struggle around validating information becomes much more complex and much more difficult when you have quality sources of information who disagree. Then you have a much more longer process of really trying to figure out what's true, what's not true, and so on. And Wikipedia does a reasonable job at that. Not perfect, but it's really about having a commitment to quality internally, of having people who are really passionate about saying, I don't care as much about the political outcome here as I care about making sure that as people are thinking about the politics, that they have a baseline of facts that we can all share and agree on.
I think part of it is also that the onus is not just on Wikipedia, it's also on us as journalists, because certainly in the BBC we have a rule that Wikipedia is not a source. And I know that many other news organizations follow the same principles. Yes, pieces about Donald Trump do tend to be self-policed a lot of the time. But if you need something really obscure, like, I don't know, sexual life of frogs, then yes, the likelihood is that somebody will make a joke and this joke will become reality at the specific moment when you're looking at Wikipedia.
It's possible. I mean, what we always say for journalists is Wikipedia is the best place to go to find out the questions, not to find out the answers. Oftentimes, if there's some controversy in Wikipedia, if you go to the talk page of an entry and people are debating something, that's usually a very interesting point for journalists because the debate will be about some facts or what have you. And then, of course, you know, there's always a possibility of a joke or a hoax or something like that. Statistically, that's quite rare, but obviously you should be thoughtful about it.
Right, last question. Over there, please.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Буду говорить по-русски, спасибо.
I'll speak Russian, please. So I have two questions. First question, given the digitalization of society, so what will happen to people that are absolutely offline from the technical standpoint? Whether their quality of life will increase or decrease? And the second question is whether we will have all our place and seats on the internet.
Just to clarify, when you say, is there enough room on the internet for all of us, what do you mean? Когда вы говорите, хватит ли нам места в интернете, что вы имеете в виду?
You know, there is a lot of content being generated and you can lose yourself in it. You know, in just one instant you get so much information created and going on. And you know, in the future, how will people from the future can discern what's important and what's not? You know, for example, Mona Lisa portrait and Instagram photo of a girl in a cafe. Nobody will know the difference anymore in the future, right? Because of the content being generated so fast. Whether we will lose our sense of value in the future, because, you know, we stay away.
Right. Sasha, do you want to?
Ну, может, я скажу.
I will add to this. You know, I speak about the same things actually. You know, the evolution keeps going, including the evolution of a person as an individual being. You know, we haven't stopped in our development. And the fact that we have more Facebook friends than our parents had in real life, it says that we're also changing. There won't be any people that will not be impacted by the transformation. It's impossible. You know, the entire world will be digital. They won't be able to hide from it, unfortunately. Maybe we will have more, you know, different people in the future. Maybe you won't like them, but unfortunately, it's not our call to make how it's going to look like and whether it's going to be, you know, whether you're going to like it or not. You know, people who lived in 17th century would also be very surprised by our lifestyle, I believe. But so what's going to happen next? I don't know, but what's going to happen will happen.
People of the future decide which is more important, Gioconda or Kermit the Frog?
Yeah, I mean, here's one of the things I would say is that and this is where I think we maybe would have a disagreement, is people are the same. People are the same as they were 1,000 years ago, and they'll be the same 1,000 years from now. Evolution is very slow, and human beings will have the same appreciation of a beautiful sunset as they do today. And so we shouldn't get too carried away with this. So when I think about the number of friends on Facebook, I also think about a lot of, so one of the things that happened to me, I moved away from my hometown, and most of the people I grew up with moved away as well, lived in a small town, and we all lost touch for about 25 years. I wonder, whatever happened to Todd? You know, I know he was going to India. Well, now I know what happened to Todd because we're friends on Facebook and we chat sometimes, and we're not close friends, but we have an old friendship, and that's not a human difference. It's not that my parents, if they moved away, they would also wonder what happened to Todd, but now we can find out. And so those kind of human valuations of caring about people and people in our lives, and we're able to maintain more loose relationships than in the past. But that's not because we're a different kind of thing now, it's because technology lets us express our humanity in a new way. So I think one of the fantastic benefits of the internet is people have the ability to learn about great cultural works in other cultures that they know nothing about in the past. And so I know more about cultural works in China than I would otherwise, because I can read about it online and the internet. I can learn about different forms of music around the world. All of these things don't mean that we don't value culture. It means we have more access to culture. And yes, of course, it's a much bigger world, and so we have access to a lot more culture. So maybe people begin to realize, oh, the Mona Lisa, this amazing, great work of art, is not the only great work of art. In fact, there are pieces of work, Chinese things that are in the museum in Taipei now that are astonishing, and you can learn about those things. So I think we'll be all right.
Thank you. So thank you very much for your questions, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to really say a huge thank you to Sasha Ivanov, founder and CEO of Waves Platform and Vostok, and to Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia. The next thing that's going to happen is Jimmy is going to deliver a lecture, which is called "What's Next in Tech? Thrive in a Wiki Future!" Is that right?
Sounds good.
Right. Thank you very much.
Maybe later. I'm going to speak right now, but yes. Fantastic. So, I have slides, but I think I'll need a clicker. Maybe someone will bring me a clicker. This is my phone. The clicker. Dun, da, da. Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much. Because it's an unusual format to have a long discussion first and then the lecture, so I tried to avoid saying things that I'm going to say again, but if I repeat a few things, it's because I always think the same ideas, and so hopefully there's a lot that's new. So this is the original vision statement for Wikipedia, and it's for all of us to imagine a world in which every single person on the planet is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge. And that's what we're doing at Wikipedia. And what's interesting about this vision statement, which I wrote many, many years ago now, is that every element of it has a specific meaning. So when I say every single person on the planet, this means that Wikipedia is inherently global. It's for everyone on the planet in their own language. And our aspiration is to provide a free encyclopedia to everyone in their own language. When we say free access, this means more than just it doesn't cost anything to read Wikipedia. That's true, of course, but it also means that everything in Wikipedia is freely licensed, so you can copy it, you can modify it, you can redistribute it, you can redistribute modified versions, and you can do all of these things commercially or non-commercially. So one of the impacts of that free licensing model is that Wikipedia has in some ways become a part of the infrastructure of the world. So if you say, okay, Google or Siri or Amazon Alexa, and you ask a question, the normal answer you'll get back is they read the first sentence from Wikipedia, because they're allowed to do that. It's all freely licensed. This is what Wikipedia is for. It's a storehouse of knowledge to be reused and repurposed by everyone for whatever they want. And then when I say the sum of all human knowledge, this is about what is in Wikipedia versus what is not in Wikipedia. So Wikipedia is meant to be a summary. It's an encyclopedia. So Wikipedia is not YouTube, so it shouldn't be full of jokes. It shouldn't be funny cat videos. It's meant to be quite serious. And it's just a summary of all human knowledge. Wikipedia is not a textbook, so you don't go to Wikipedia if you want to have an in-depth knowledge of something. Wikipedia is only your starting point. Maybe you say, oh, I want to learn about the new technology of CRISPR, gene editing. Well, you couldn't go to Wikipedia and become an expert and then go do gene editing, but you could learn about the technology and what it means and what are the implications and where does it stand and what are the next things that might happen. And that's the purpose of Wikipedia. Click. So what is Wikipedia? I think I've just covered that, but it is important. That Wikipedia is a free encyclopedia, multilingual encyclopedia, written by thousands of volunteers from all around the world. The volunteer aspect of Wikipedia is very important. That we are a charity is something that we are very proud of, and that our only purpose in existing is to share knowledge. And so, in some ways, although Wikipedia is the 5th most popular website in the world, and then therefore clearly one of the big giants. Financially, we're not a giant, and certainly when we think about a lot of the controversies around technology and the power of platforms, we haven't really been implicated in those things. We have no scandals like Cambridge Analytica because our business model doesn't involve sharing data with anyone. We don't even collect much data. We have only one purpose, and that is to share knowledge. So our community has written over 40 million articles in about 270 different languages. This is a number of websites that we have set up, but actually there's really only about 120 or so that are the largest languages. There's still a lot of languages where Wikipedia is very, very small. So the languages of India, some of them are growing quite quickly, but they're still smaller than I would like them to be. A lot of the languages of Africa are very weak in Wikipedia and just now beginning to grow. So we have a long way to go when we think about the vision of a free encyclopedia for everyone. And we have around 400 million unique visitors. Now this number comes from ComScore. This is how many people visit Wikipedia in a month. But we know that ComScore is very good at measuring traffic in well-developed advertising markets because that's their business model. They measure traffic for the purpose of advertising. But the truth is they aren't as good at measuring across sub-Saharan Africa, across China, and so forth. We know from our internal server log data that about 1.3 billion devices access Wikipedia every month. So a device isn't a person. Probably almost everyone here probably sees Wikipedia in a month's time. You see it on your phone, on your laptop, maybe a tablet, so 2 or 3 devices. But still, 1.3 billion, it's a lot of people. And so Wikipedia is really a part of the infrastructure of the world. We're very unusual in the fact that we're a nonprofit organization. So journalists love to write stories about me, just astonished at the fact that I'm not a billionaire, but I'm not a billionaire. Because I deliberately set Wikipedia up and put it into the charity structure because I want Wikipedia to really be something for everyone. It's a cultural concept that for me is what the original dream of the internet was really all about. I don't think when the internet was first invented and you first saw the internet, how many people said, oh, this is great, now I can receive highly targeted advertising on my phone? No, that's not what you thought at all. You thought, wow, it's an amazing global tool for communication and sharing knowledge, and that's what Wikipedia is all about. And so we are a fairly small nonprofit organization. We're under $100 million a year in revenue. And we have about 270 employees, and we're financially stable. Obviously, everyone knows that Wikipedia raises money from donations. This has always been very important to us, but we're stable, and we're not in any current financial trouble, so that's really good news. Now I'm going to show you a video to move on into thinking about what is the philosophy behind Wikipedia? And this is going to touch on a lot of the ideas that we discussed earlier already tonight around the question of quality of information. And so I'm going to just show you this video. I hope the sound is turned up and not too loud. It was so loud earlier it frightened me. Let's see how it goes.
The fact that information spreads quickly means that truth can spread quickly and lies can spread quickly. And Wikipedia, I think, really tries to be that place you go when you've got a moment to reflect, to say, okay, I actually need to learn about this.
Wikipedia is a crowdsourced encyclopedia. You don't have to buy it, and anyone can edit it.
So you have to have your sources, and you have to have your citations. So there's always a way to back up the information. So it's not just out there recklessly or irresponsibly. There's always something, backing it up so that you can always start back from the original source.
Working with Wikipedia is not only about writing articles, but to understand the whole system of knowledge production. What's our place in the knowledge society?
وجهة نظرنا هنخليها على جنب وبكده التحديات مش هيبقى فيه تحديات بمعنى تحديات ان احنا نخش في صراع او يعني ندخل في صراع مع اي طرف.
نتعرف من خلالها على التقنيات اللي وراء موقع ويكيبيديا العالمي الشهير.
1, 2, 3.
Bonjour de Montréal. Ankara'dan selamlar.
I'm from Ukraine.
I'm from Ghana.
I'm from Argentina. From Moscow, Russia.
I come from Egypt.
Hong Kong, Israel.
Berlin, South India.
Ramallah, Palestine.
ما كنت بتوقع انها مؤسسه هالقد عملاقه فيها عدد كبير من الفولنتيرز يعني المتطوعين في الاوبن سورس حوالين العالم. هذا شيء صادم كان لإلي وحبيت الفكره كثير.
We are fundamentally community driven, and this is very different from any other top website, and it matters. Whatever you might think of Wikipedia, whatever problems Wikipedia has, of course we have problems. Nobody ever sits around and says, oh yeah, well, they're beholden to their advertisers. Our community has a very high degree of intellectual independence. No one can come to us and try to lean on us to put false information in Wikipedia or to hide some true information that they don't like, because frankly, the money comes from the general public, and that means we're beholden to the general public. In 100 years, when people look back on this era, these decades around the first of this century, they're going to point at Wikipedia as one of the things that was really good.
We can edit!
Right. And because this is a Wikipedia video, at the end, there's like 100 footnotes at the end, the sources for everything. So we can skip over that now. So one of the things I like to talk about, because if you know, one of the things that we want to talk about today is digital transformation and how do we move from one state of affairs to another. And this goes to the heart of what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, and what does the process of entrepreneurship look like, and how do we move forward in ways that will work. And one of the things that I love to talk about is failure. And Jimmy Wales is good at it. I've done many failures in my lifetime, and I think it's important when we're thinking about entrepreneurship and digital transformation and change to realize that it's a bumpy process, that many things don't work as they were planned. And so let me just tell you about a few of the bad ideas I've had in my career. So when I was early in my career, I was working in Chicago. I worked in downtown Chicago as a futures and options trader, and I was very keen about the internet. I was really a technologist and doing all this, and I had a brilliant business idea, and the idea was I saw that people were using very inefficient ways to get food at work, using fax machines to fax their orders or calling, sending someone out to get food and so on, and I realized this will all move to the internet, that you'll be able to order food for delivery online, which is of course quite commonplace today, but I thought, okay, this is a great idea. This is going to be a huge business. We can put restaurants online. And so that was my first real business. And failure, Jimmy Wales is good at it. In 1996, restaurant owners looked at me like I was from Mars. When I went into them and I said, oh, we should put your website on the internet. They said, what is the internet? What are you talking about? They had no idea. It was too early for that idea. And in fact, only in the last few years have we seen some really big businesses arise doing food delivery online. And this is finally an idea that would have worked, but I was much too early. Another fun idea I had, I created a search engine. I also consider myself a genius at branding. As you'll see, the name of the search engine was 3 Apes. And our slogan was, type your search and the apes will find it. How could this not succeed? It's brilliant. No, it was stupid, and it didn't succeed. But the idea here was that pay-per-click advertising, that you would pay to advertise. But my clever idea is that there would be 2 ways to pay. You could either pay by actually paying money for advertising in the search engine, or you could send traffic to us and earn credits. Because I realized that as a small search engine, we wouldn't be able to sell many ads unless we had traffic. So we said, oh, people can send traffic and earn credits. Sounds like a really great idea. What was the result? Failure. Jimmy Wales is really good at it. Chinese spammers took over the site within 3 months. I was getting a lot of traffic for Chinese search terms and a lot of very confused emails from people demanding payment, and I tried to explain to them, no, when you send us traffic, you get credit for advertising, and they didn't know what I meant. Anyway, it was a disaster, so I had to shut that one down. That didn't work. Then I had the idea for Nupedia. The brilliant business idea here is a free encyclopedia for everyone. Okay, this is starting to sound familiar. The idea is that it would be written by experts. I hired a PhD in philosophy to design the whole system, how it would work. And what was the result of Nupedia? Failure. Jimmy Wales is really good at it. I spent about $250,000 getting the first 12 articles published. I joke that I still keep them by my bedside and read them every night. I will get my money's worth someday. But the truth is, we didn't understand community. We didn't understand how to do it. The vision and the idea to say a free encyclopedia for everyone was exciting, but I had no idea how to organize it. I didn't know about wikis. I didn't know anything like that. So as this was coming to an end and I was realizing it wasn't working, and I have a whole story to tell about how that happened, about how I came to understand that it wouldn't work when I tried to write an entry and realized that it was very intimidating and not very fun. Once I realized that, I had a really dumb idea. Again, a free encyclopedia for everyone. Open up a website, let anyone edit it. We would have no advertising, and in fact, no sane business plan of any kind. And what was the result? Success. Even Jimmy can do it sometimes. Yeah. So Wikipedia, of course, has been a massive success. It's the #5 website in the world, changing the face of knowledge forever. And it's an inspirational story. People love the idea of Wikipedia, that people have come together out of the goodness of their hearts as charity volunteers just to try to share knowledge, to try to do quality work that's meaningful to other people. And as imperfect as it is, this is what we do, and we're really happy about it. But I am an entrepreneur. I'm always thinking of something new and trying something. I had the idea for a search engine. So Wikia Search was a concept to say, let's build a search engine that would be open source. It got a lot of press coverage. Here's the cover of Fast Company magazine. They called me Google's worst nightmare. I'm not sure that was ever true, but my mother bought 10 copies of the magazine, so that was okay. So the result was, again, failure. Had to close the project during the economic downturn. So the concept of Wikia Search was to do a very transparent search engine. We would publish all the algorithms, open source software. Rather than play a hide and seek game with the scammers, we would be very open and public about how we were doing things. We would let the community re-rank and reorder things. I actually was quite pleased with the early progress of the software, but we got into a certain stage and realized it was going to take another $10 million of investment to really get to the next level. And this was when Lehman Brothers collapsed and the financial crisis hit in 2008. There was no possibility of raising money, and so we just had to put the project down and say, okay, this isn't working. We don't have the ability to raise the money to do further. But then there was another brilliant business idea around Wikia. Wikia had actually been around a few years. The search engine was a side project. And the concept of Wikia was to build on the Wikipedia model, empower everyone to build the rest of the library. So it's not just the serious encyclopedia, but it's all kinds of things. Focus on making it easy to use. Pay attention to what topics would have good ad revenue and try to promote those topics. And what was the result? Success. Even Jimmy can do it a second time. So Wikia now has about 200 million monthly visitors. So not as popular as Wikipedia, but 200 million is quite a lot of people. And it's ranked around the number 20 website online, and advertising supported, and it's doing very well. We're actually rebranding to the name Fandom, because it turns out the most popular wikis at Wikia are fan wikis. So if you're a fan of any of the modern super complicated TV shows like Game of Thrones, you've probably ended up on the Game of Thrones wiki because it's so complicated you can't remember all those. There's a million kings and they all have beards and they look the same, and so you have to Google them. So there are a lot of lessons here, and I think there are a lot of lessons in the wiki story. But I think the most important one is that collaboration is possible and that collaboration is necessary. So all of these things came about because of a learning that I had from the Nupedia era, when I realized people wanted to do good work, but you had to actually trust people. We had to actually open up. And so instead of having a 7-stage review process to get everything published, we had to be open and say, oh, come and write something and we'll look at it and we'll improve it and we'll change it as we go along. And we'll have a very open, collaborative structure. And this turns out to be very, very powerful, that a lot of people are eager to cooperate and collaborate. And of course, we know this now. It seems like a very straightforward lesson. But I think even today, a lot of businesses and a lot of new ideas forget the concept. One of the interesting things that's happening today, obviously in the blockchain world, that there's a very big community of people who are interested in blockchain, who are collaborating and working together in all kinds of interesting, complicated ways. And that's one of the reasons for the success of blockchain. Blockchain would never have emerged from a single company that was saying, we have this genius idea and we're going to build it in-house and we're not going to collaborate, we're going to promote it. Instead, it's become what it is today because it's open to everyone to participate and to come in and to do new ideas, and that's really, really powerful. So now I want to talk about my new project, which is Wiki Tribune, and this is really how I'm spending most of my time these days, because I've been very, very concerned about the problems that we've seen with the news media, with fake news, with incorrect information, with low-quality media. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, some of the things I see, the reasons for it, and what I think are some of the cures for it. So Wiki Tribune is an entirely new organization. So it's not associated with Wikipedia or Wikia. It's a completely new startup based in London, which is where I live. And we've got paid professional journalists, and they're working together side by side with community members. So this is a pretty radical concept. We know that most news sites today, after all of these years, you basically have the news article here, and if there's any element of community, it's the bottom of the article where the commenters are, and basically it's the worst elements of humanity screaming at each other, like just terrible people. It's completely useless, and I think most people understand that. Our idea is to say, look, there is a better way, that we know from the world of Wikipedia there are a lot of, and from Wikia, there are a lot of really thoughtful, kind people who want to help out, who have a lot of value to bring. And yet we know that citizen journalism, while there have been some interesting projects out there, has never really crossed over. It's never really become a full thing. I believe the reason for that is there's a lot of things that only professional journalists can do. One of the things I think a lot of professional journalists think that only they can do is write well. Turns out that's not true. Lots of people can write well. But what is harder for people to do is to drop everything and follow a story for 4 days. It's harder for people to get someone on the phone to actually interview them. There's a lot of reliability questions. And so we're just really doing a pilot project to try to explore some ideas around how do we best get the community involved and how do we best get journalists involved. I've launched the project with no ads and no paywall. So I've been joking a series of bad business decisions, but that's how I've built my career so far. We're just trying to see what can we do, what can we explore. So let's go into this a little bit more. So inside Wikipedia, we're very passionate about facts. You saw the video earlier, a lot of Wikipedia volunteers talking about quality of sources and verifiability of information and the importance of neutrality. And that's really the Wikipedia spirit inside our community. So inside our community, we're very passionate about facts. It's very upsetting to people in Wikipedia when people talk about a post-truth world or a post-fact world. This is a terrible expression and something that we want to avoid at all costs. But what's going on outside of Wikipedia? Well, I'm just going to give you an example. So one of the things that has happened is that the advertising-only business model has been incredibly destructive for journalism. And why is this? So the traditional reason people worried about advertising as a business model for journalism was the question of, can big advertisers have undue influence on the content? In general, that was always a concern, but I think most serious news organizations handle that very well. Maybe the New York Times has General Motors as a big advertiser, but that didn't stop them from running a negative story about General Motors if it was necessary, because they had the right processes internally in place to do that. Obviously, it's something that we could still worry about, but in my view, that wasn't the most serious problem. But now, because of the rise of programmatic advertising, the advertising-only business model actually has a different problem. The problem isn't that the advertisers have undue influence over the content. The problem is really much different. So whenever I go on the internet, I go anywhere on the internet. I can go to any website, just about any website, and I see the same ads no matter where I go. I'm interested in boats. I like boats. I read boat magazines. I go to boating websites. And guess what I get? I get ads for boats and boating equipment. Doesn't matter where I go. What does that mean? That means if I'm visiting a popular internet message board like Reddit, I see the exact same ads as if I visit the New York Times. And so I might be reading something that they had to pay a senior journalist to spend 3 weeks working on a story. It was expensive to produce. There were a lot of costs involved. And they earn the same amount of revenue as a page on a message board, which costs no one anything to produce. And so that business model problem has been enormous. And so we've seen that news organizations have been under incredible financial pressure. This is particularly true at the local level. Local newspapers have been devastated by the changes in the internet, and largely because of this, they're competing head-to-head with content that costs nothing to produce. So that model hasn't been working and has led to a lot of very unhealthy things. One of them that everybody is familiar with is the clickbait headline. So, you're surfing the web and you're looking at something serious or something you wanted to see, but then you see a headline and you just can't resist clicking on it. I'm guilty as anybody. If you say, you'll never believe what this child star looks like today, I always go for it. I can't stop myself. Although I have a trick for that. I've decided, instead of clicking that, I just go to Google and I type, what does so-and-so look like today? And then I get a picture and I'm done. I don't have to click through 20 pages of nonsense. But I just, for amusement, I want everybody to imagine that, suppose Wikipedia had an advertising business model. Sometimes people say to me, well, why don't you put ads in Wikipedia? That would be a lot of money for Wikipedia. And one of the main reasons I have for not doing that is that it would fundamentally change the organization. It changes the DNA of the organization. Organizations naturally tend to follow the money. At Wikipedia, amongst the staff, no one cares if you're reading a high advertising dollar topic or not. Like, you can read about some obscure Chinese poetry, and that's completely fine with us. But if suddenly we were advertising driven, we would, first of all, we'd have more concern about getting the next million readers in California, a very strong, high value advertising market, than the next million in sub-Saharan Africa, where there's no advertising money. We would also care what you're reading in a different way. We want to drive you to topics with high ad revenue. Wikipedia might end up looking something like this, which I think everyone would agree would be a disaster, where a lot of the things at the bottom here are all advertising for clickbait advertising. The things here are just designed to keep people clicking. Apparently, girls in bikinis is always a popular thing to keep people clicking. And so this would be a disaster. It's not something we want. And I've taken this screenshot. It's a copy of the Daily Mail, the Mail Online, which is probably the most popular newspaper website in the world, despite being incredibly clickbaity and incredibly low quality. And I think that's something we should all be concerned about. So this is a fantastic photo. This is a beautiful picture. This is it's showing a sunrise in Beijing. And it's a little dark on the screen, but you can see it's a very smoggy day. This was taken in the daylight, but there's a lot of smog, a lot of pollution in the air. And so it's a beautiful and a striking photo. And here's the headline from the Mail Online. China starts televising the sunrise on giant TV screens because Beijing is so clouded in smog. So this is a great story. It went viral. It's a good human interest story. It's got a great photo. The only problem with the story is that it's just completely untrue, and it's been widely debunked online. People aren't watching the sunrise on TV. This is all completely true. The real story here, the real story is this. Westerners are so convinced China is a dystopian hellscape, they'll share anything that confirms it. By the way, as an American, and I currently live in London, the same phenomenon applies for Russia, right? Anything terrible or horrible about Russia gets widely shared. It confirms people's biases, which is not fair, and it's quite natural. And I assume the same thing happens here, that stories get shared about horrible things in Europe that are maybe not fair, but that appeal to our bias and get shared over and over. In this case, the Daily Mail is completely guilty of this story. Actually, I Googled some of the words in the story to figure out where it came from, because it says it's by James Nye, who works for the Mail, and Associated Press reported. The Associated Press is the news service in the U.S. It's quite straightforward. It's generally very neutral. by Googling the phrases, I found the original story from the Associated Press, which was a very boring story about pollution levels are quite high in Beijing this week, and meteorologists are expecting it to clear next week because a big wind is coming through, but in the meantime, people are being advised, typical pollution story. The part about the TV screen, the Mail just made that up out of thin air, and it's completely untrue. And yet, they made money from the story. It was shared thousands of times, and I think this is a problem, that there is this business model that encourages a paper, which is already fairly questionable newspaper, but it encourages them to go even further down a path of toxicity and just terrible. The truth is, a story like that, they had two reasons to run it. One reason is it's clickbait, it's going to get traffic, it's a beautiful picture, it's a great story, who cares if it's true or not. The other is it fits in a very subtle way the Mail's political agenda, which is very little England and very foreigners are bad and everything everywhere else is bad and the only good place is England and we better leave Europe because terrible things are coming to Europe and so on. And so Wiki Tribune is a completely new website. This is more or less what it looks like. We keep changing the design. We're being very fast iterations, changing how it looks, how the editing works, all of that. But the idea is to allow more people to participate in news, to work together with the journalists. We do a lot of stories. Our most popular topic is blockchain and Bitcoin. That's because a lot of the people who follow the site are fans of me, so they're tech-savvy people who are interested in the topic. And so we try to cover that as best we can. And yeah, that's Wiki Tribune. Check it out. Thank you. Okay, now I think we're doing a fireside chat with no fire. Yes? Yes? I'll do this quickly.
Thank you so much.
Great. Okay.
For a successful fireside chat, we need three things. We need the fireside, we need chairs, and we need microphones.
Yes.
We have one, so we're going to have to wait for about 2 or 3 minutes for the other two things to arrive.
Okay.
Right.
Maybe we could also have some water for me. Oh,
Whiskey.
okay.
Whiskey.
We can get started.
Right, okay. Thank you very much for this, Jimmy. I've been studiously making notes. And you said something which I thought I'd ask you about. You said the internet was not supposed to be a place where you see targeted ads on the mobile phone. I'm going to ask you a very journalistic question. How does it make you feel?
Oh, it's interesting because I guess I should be careful. I like targeted ads on my mobile phone. I like targeted ads better than untargeted. So I remember when the ads I would get in the early days of Facebook, or maybe not that early, but there was a point in time where the only ads I would get were for mail order brides. Like I got a lot of those because I was in a certain age category and single, and I guess they thought maybe I would be interested. Completely useless ads, and now I get ads that are useful. I think that is a positive thing, but it has a lot of interesting side effects and so on. I've always been someone who thinks that the internet can be a place for both non-commercial and commercial things. One of the reasons that I don't want to have ads in Wikipedia is I think it's one of those spaces that we need in society that's non-commercial. So let me give this example. If I go into a grocery store and I'm just buying groceries and then somebody's there and they're offering me a free sample. They say, oh look, here's our new product, would you try it? Oh, okay, great. I'm shopping for groceries and I'll try it and maybe I like it, maybe I don't. This is a normal place to promote something to me and I think that's fine. If I'm visiting my mother and it's a Sunday afternoon and my mother's been cooking dinner for the whole family and somebody knocks on the door and says, oh, would you like to try our new chicken product? I said, oh, this is a very strange, I don't want an advertisement right now, I'm visiting my mom. And so I think Wikipedia is a bit like that. Like it's fine if there's great e-commerce sites and advertising supported sites, there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, Wikipedia is a place you go to get away from all that. You want to think, you want to reflect. You don't want to be distracted by girls in bikinis or ads about your teeth falling out or whatever crazy things. You just want to focus your mind for a second, and I think that's important.
But making this choice meant that you're not a billionaire, and it meant that you don't have a 50 gazillion meter long yacht. How big a problem is that?
I'm completely fine with it. I have the most interesting life. It's one of the things that I always say this, I live in London, a huge banking capital. There are bankers in London who no one's ever heard of, who make far more money than I ever will, and their lives are incredibly boring compared to mine. I can meet anybody in the world, I meet all kinds of interesting people, from Wikipedia volunteers to, I don't know, I met Medvedev, I thought that was cool, you know, like these are the kinds of things that I get to do. And so I think when we think about money in life, when people measure life by money, they're making a huge mistake. For me, I just like to do something that's interesting. And if I can get up every day and do something that's interesting, and of course, you know, compared to the global average, I'm not poor. No one should worry about me. I've got a nice house, so.
You spoke about helping sort facts from opinion and helping sort facts from fiction, and you spoke about how we're not in a... Oh, look at that.
Oh, great.
Magic. Thank you.
So now all we need is the fire.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh,
so,
and the water magic.
Oh, there's
right
even
there,
water.
too.
Oh,
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yes, so you spoke about facts and opinion, and I would add emotion to this mix. Wikipedia is obviously very much fact-based. It's very dry, right?
Yes.
As a journalist, I know that facts don't really appeal to a lot of people. So Wikitribune seems to be based on a similar model. It's quite dry, it's quite factual. Why is that? Why are you making a journalistic product which I would say violates one of the key rules of journalism? Don't tell people facts, tell them stories.
I mean, that's a really interesting view, because I actually think one of the things that we have too much of in the world is stories without facts. And so, well, I think it's an interesting tension, and it's one that we talk about internally quite a lot, which is if you want to have collaboration around journalism, what are the areas where I can see a quality community helping with journalism? And a lot of it is like amazing levels of desk research, verification, any story that can be parallelized. So you're going to say, you know, what are the laws about marijuana legalization in all the 50 states of the US? Well, one person could sit and research that. It would take quite a long time, but 50 people can do it quite quickly. So those are the kinds of things that are very fact-based, very collaborative. What collaboration isn't as good for, and we see this as well in the world of fiction, no one's seen an amazing novel that was written by 50 people. It doesn't work. In order to have a novel, to have a story, you need a single vision, maybe two people if they're good friends or great writers, they can collaborate a bit. But that kind of story arc requires a vision of where you're going. It's just not very easy to collaborate on. So we'll focus on what we think we can be good at, which is this. That doesn't mean that I think other things are not valuable. I love a long read, sort of weekend piece in The Guardian or the New York Times or somewhere like that, where you know a journalist has spent a lot of time and a lot of passion, a lot of talent, really understanding some topic and then telling me the story of that in an entertaining way. They better also be factual. I don't want the storytelling to interfere with being factual. But I also think there are lots of things. I'll give an example. Just recently, when the Senate voted to approve Donald Trump's tax cuts, I went to all kinds of newspapers. I went to left-leaning, right-leaning, business papers everywhere, and I couldn't really find anybody who would just explain to me what is in this tax law. Instead, I got a lot of stories, a lot of alarmism, a lot of hope, a lot of all kinds of things. You know, people saying, here's how it's going to screw over poor people, here's how it's going to generate jobs, here's this, here's that, lots of opinion. But what I really wanted that morning was, I want to know what's changing in the law. And we just don't have enough of that, and I would like to see more of that.
And why are there no pictures on Wikitribune?
Oh, why are there no pictures? Well, we have some pictures. We don't have any on the front page at the moment. We'll have some. It's because pictures are quite expensive, and we have almost no budget. So we license pictures from Reuters, but we have a small budget for doing that. And that's actually an interesting story, because it's one of the areas where in terms of citizen journalism, where you can see it from two perspectives. So a lot of news pictures are just because somebody could be there at that time. So here's a photo of Donald Trump shaking hands with Angela Merkel. Okay, it's not an artistic photo. It's pretty straightforward. There were 70 photographers standing in a line taking the photo. That kind of photo, it's hard to get access, so how can a community do it? Other photos are photos that you can imagine the public could have a huge advantage over traditional photography because literally everyone has a camera in their pocket. So if something happens, someone can get a picture of it. But how do you get those into a project? How do you verify that they're real? Because a lot of photos from war zones, for example, are fake on social media and so forth. So it's super interesting to think about. And then, of course, there are some photos that are just spectacular. Like this photo I showed, the photographer should get huge credit. It's an amazing photo, and it tells a story, not the story the Daily Mail told, but it does tell a story. It's quite interesting.
You spoke about the advertising-based model and how it's not working, but there's a new model emerging, isn't there? There's a model of subscription, which you mentioned in your talk earlier.
Yeah.
Do you think there is any hope that subscription will fix what's broken with advertising?
So I hope so. I'm very excited about it. I'm very optimistic about it, but I always say I'm a pathological optimist. So if I'm optimistic, that doesn't necessarily prove anything. But so the New York Times has gone from around 1 million digital subscriptions to 3 million in a couple years' time. And I think this is really important because for journalism, the best money to support journalism is money that comes from the readers, because then the incentives are aligned. I'm here to serve the interests of my readers. I'm here to find out the things they need to know, and that's valuable. Versus if the ads, and there's nothing wrong, by the way, with some money coming from ads. I just think it's when it's advertising only, then suddenly I don't care to serve the interests of my readers, not in any fundamental way that's meaningful to them. I just want to get their attention. So what I say, the reason we've launched with no ads is I tell my journalists, look, I need you to get people to read to the bottom of something, and then they need to think, wow, that's different. I didn't see that anywhere else. I understand the world in a new way. I learned something here. This should exist. I want to support this, and to be willing to do that. And that's a very different incentive than if if your boss at a newspaper says, oh, here's your click statistics for this week. By the way, your story only got shared 50 times, and this person's story got shared 5,000 times. Do more of that. That just drives everybody in the wrong direction, and I think that's unfortunate. So I'm optimistic about the rise of the subscription model, but I also think apps will help with this as well. Just the app model makes it easy to transact. So if I can, we've seen this transformation already in gaming. So something like Angry Birds costs $4 to download, and it was a huge smash hit game. Whereas 10 years earlier, if you tried to have a huge smash hit game that cost $4, it wouldn't have worked. It was too hard to transact. Nobody's going to get their credit card out to pay online for a $4 game. You can't really sell it in a store in a box for $4 and so on. But now that casual gaming market has exploded because people can say, oh, okay, here's a game, everybody's talking about it, it's $2, who cares, right? I think the same thing can happen. For magazines, for example, as I said, I read boating magazines. I subscribe to more magazines now than, I went through a period where I hardly even ever bought magazines, maybe occasionally in an airport on a newsstand. Now I subscribe to like 10 different magazines, but I do it on Kindle, on my phone. Because it's just one click, it's easy. I'm bored, I say, well, oh, that looks interesting, I'll get this magazine. So those kinds of tech changes where we're finding it easier for consumers to say, I will pay for the information that I want, is a positive sign, I think, for journalism.
So maybe news is not broken after all.
It has been broken, but hopefully we'll find ways to fix it, yeah.
And are there any other things apart from journalism which you think your model can fix, which need fixing?
It's a good question.
What's the next big direction change?
Oh, I have no idea. I can only do one at a time.
The problem of lorry drivers who are going to lose their jobs.
Yes.
Is there a solution to that? Is there a collaborative solution to that, perhaps?
It's a very good question. One of the things that I do think is an important trend that will help to some extent is the rise of online learning. So one of the things we see with the rise of free and low-cost digital courses online is that, so the amount of formal education, so how many people are graduating from universities in a very traditional formal way, it's pretty stable. It's maybe slightly rising around the world, some countries up, some down, but that's a pretty stable thing. But what's changed dramatically in the last 40 years is the number of people who are learning something through an online course that they just casually pick up and they learn, or they say, oh, I really want to know more about history, so they go and they start reading Wikipedia, or they get some books online or things like that. That kind of casual learning has really exploded, and I think that will have some positive, very hard to measure, right, but some positive impact. If you're a long-haul truck driver now, and you see what's going on, and you say, wow, my job, particularly if you're young, if you're 25 years old and you're a long-haul truck driver, you might say, in 15 years, this job probably won't exist. I better start thinking about what's next, and having flexible online educational options where they can learn a new skill or thing is really important. It's not the whole solution, obviously, right? It can help a little bit. I think we really do need to be thinking about it, though. I'm very concerned about what will happen in the disruption. And I picked that one because it's quite easy, but I don't want to leave the impression that, oh, well, there's one industry of 2 million jobs. In the US alone, there's 2 million that's going to go away. There's lots of industries where lots of things are going to happen, and people who are doing relatively low-skilled manual labor are going to be replaced. And we need to figure out what we're going to do, or they're going to be very angry, and quite rightly so, that the world has let them down, and that everybody's excited because, wow, the cost of shipping has dropped dramatically. Great, now we can get more products cheaper. Okay, great, but I don't have any money, so it's not helping me at all. And I think we really have to make sure that this transition is managed well.
Final question from me before we again throw it open. Do you see any existential threats to Wikipedia and to your model as the internet develops and as the society changes?
No, not really, but I'm a pathological optimist, so I always think everything's going to be fine, so it's really hard for me to think in this way. But the kinds of things that we do look at, so Wikipedia depends on donations, and so we're not funded by Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook. We're funded by the general public. Small donations is the real backbone, and the way that happens is people come and visit the site, and then every now and then you see a little banner that says please donate, and so that begins to get much harder if people are saying, oh, well, I just get my information from Alexa, and they don't even understand that it comes from Wikipedia. So that disintermediation through technology is something that we do need to pay attention to. It hasn't really had an impact on us yet. An example of this that's not about voice assistants, but if you went 15 years ago and you went to Google and, well, no, 15? Yeah, maybe 15, 10 years ago, and you said, how old is Tom Cruise? Then the first link would be Wikipedia, and you would go to Wikipedia and you would read how old is Tom Cruise. Now, the first link is still Wikipedia, but above that, it tells you exactly how old is Tom Cruise because Google has read Wikipedia, the great machine of Google. And so, does that hurt us or does that help us? Well, for a while we were afraid that was hurting us, that people were not coming to Wikipedia because they were just finding out what they needed to know directly. But then, and I started saying that in public, and then our research team said, Jimmy, stop saying that in public. It's not really clear, because actually, there's a lot of searches today where between Wikipedia and Wikia, we're like the first half of the search results. So, because they do, when they say they got it from Wikipedia, people click on that link, and then they click on Wikipedia, and they click on, so it's complicated. But we do think about that, like shifts in technology. So another example, we know that the shift in so for Facebook, as an example, their revenue per page view on mobile is significantly lower than revenue per page view on the desktop, because in the desktop environment, advertising works a lot better, and in the mobile it's a tiny screen, so the ads don't work so well. Well, it turns out, even though we're not ad-driven, the same phenomenon is true for us. If you visit Wikipedia on your mobile phone and you see us saying, oh, please donate to Wikipedia, people don't. It's too much trouble to type in your card number, but on your desktop you do. And so that's another potential threat. If people are consuming Wikipedia in ways that mean they won't think to give us money, then that's a financial threat. But I'm not that worried about it. I think it's fine. People used to say, what if Microsoft decides to compete with you? This is back when Microsoft was still like a terrifying competitor for everyone. And I said, it seems unlikely that they would, because Wikipedia is a terrible, terrible business. So it's kind of hard to compete with us. We give everything away for free. You can even copy it. You can do whatever you like. We don't really have any barriers to entry, so knock yourselves out. And so we're not worried about competition, really.
Thank you. Right, ladies and gentlemen, over to you. Yes. Can you just please say your name before you ask the question, yeah? Thank you. Okay, hang on a sec. Right, go on.
Okay. Thank you so much for your lecture. I have two questions, actually. The first one, when you want to find something in the internet, for example, which sources do you use, including Wikipedia, if you use Wikipedia for that? And the second one is, if I want to write for Wiki Tribune, what I need to do?
Sure,
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I use a wide variety of sources. So for news, I always start with Google News as my news homepage, but I'm always logged out when I do it because I don't want it to be customized to me. Because I like to get a diversity of sources, and I feel like if you're logged in and you're using Google News, they learn what you're interested in and they show you more of that, and I'm worried about the filter bubble. So I use that. I use Wikipedia. I love the BBC website. I don't know. I like science, so I read a lot of scientific websites. And then for Wiki Tribune, to get started, just come and click edit, create an account, start doing something, try to be nice, and we'll be nice back to you. It's quite easy. We're very welcoming.
Thank you. Yes, please. There might be a microphone making its way to you somewhere.
Well, I have one tiny question. You said that a lot of people come on online courses, yes, and try to educate online. How do you think, would it be possible the integration of Wikipedia as encyclopedia and online courses for like TED or Coursera and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting. So I think the integration of online courses and Wikipedia is a nice combination, and of course it happens naturally anyway. So if I'm interested in some topic, so for me personally, when I moved to the UK, I got interested in English history because I didn't know much about it. I mean, a little bit, but you know. And so I found an Oxford course on English history with an Oxford professor just lecturing to an audience. Is quite, you know. I only watched about half of it. And by the way, this is one of the criticisms of online courses. People say, yes, people start them, but they often don't finish. And my answer to that is, it's okay. I'm not trying to get a degree. I just wanted to learn. I watched 4 lectures. I didn't watch the rest of it, but I learned something. That's fine. But in the course of listening to this and watching this, I also went to Wikipedia as a companion. So I think that can be quite good. And I think a lot of online courses benefit from people can just go quickly. If you get confused, you can go read Wikipedia and get some better. In terms of more formal integrations, it's a good question. I don't know. We're very open to people doing whatever they want with Wikipedia content. So because it's freely licensed, we think people can use it in all kinds of interesting ways, and I think that is a good idea.
Right. Yes, you wanted to ask a question, didn't you?
Thank you. My name is Sergey Popov. You are saying so many right things, doing so many good things. You are a self-ironic person, which means an intellectual. So this is not a compliment, this is a question. Are you still a businessman, and why nobody else is like you?
Am I still a businessman?
Yes, and why nobody else is like you? I mean, giving stuff for free and so on.
Good question. Yeah, so I am a businessman to some extent, but I'm not a very good businessman. I'm the first to admit. And I'm actually very fortunate that I've managed to become successful, because I would be a terrible employee because I just do whatever I think is most interesting all the time, and that's not great if you've got a job and you need to and I'm a terrible manager. I always have to have people around me who are good managers. So I know my weaknesses, and I think that's quite important. And I do think, I mean, what's interesting is I think a lot of the people in the tech world are quite idealistic. I mean, there is that kind of California optimism, and I think a lot of them are trying to do good things, and then sometimes the world is a little bit too cynical about those things. You know, when I see a lot of the things that Google is doing, so when Google is doing Project Loon, you know, with these balloons to try to get internet to poor parts of the world, it's not clear to me that there's a solid business model. And so if they were really only about business, I think they would say, okay, well, it's good PR, it makes us look nice, maybe we'll open up a new market. But realistically, if you analyze a project like that with a hard-nosed business look, you would say probably this isn't a great investment, but they do it anyway, and I think that's good. I think they're interesting in that way. I don't know. Elon Musk is also quite interesting, although it's sort of getting to be a bit of a joke. If there's some crisis in the world, it's the next day when you hear what Elon Musk is going to do to solve it.
Facebook had a similar project, didn't they, with balloons, but they pulled out of it.
Yeah, Facebook has had some similar projects. I don't know the status.
They pulled out of it.
They pulled out of it, yeah. I mean, sometimes we can be cynical and say, oh, they pulled out because they don't really care. The other thing, they might have pulled out because they realized their approach wasn't functional or going to work. I don't know. But I think, so one of the things that I think is really interesting when we think about how the media talks about entrepreneurship. I mean, the number of news articles about me that talk about that I'm not a billionaire is a bit silly and a bit unfortunate. And also, I talk to young entrepreneurs a lot, and a lot of young entrepreneurs really have a certain kind of a block from getting started oftentimes because of the model they have in mind is of Mark Zuckerberg. So the model that you can have in mind of a great entrepreneur is at age 21, you have this amazing idea, you launch it, it grows like crazy, you become worth $50 billion, you're a huge success, and so on. But most entrepreneurs, that's not the path they take. Most entrepreneurs fail and fail and fail. You try something and you fail and you learn from it. And actually, that's the more interesting story to tell, and to say, actually, let's remember that, it's not easy. And in fact, one of the things that I think is culturally important across the world that California is very good at is the idea that, gee, if you try something, so actually in Asia, there's a real, I don't know the culture here as much, but in Asia, there's a real problem that people are afraid to start something because if it fails, the amount of shame and the amount of negativity from family members and so on will be so terrible that it's just not worth thinking about. Whereas in California, okay, you go, you do a startup, it fails, and then you get a great job after that, or you go and start another startup, or you join with other entrepreneurs, you do different things. And that idea that failure is not a black mark on your soul is really important. If we want to have innovative solutions, we need to make sure that young people feel comfortable saying, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to try it. It might not work, but it might work. If it works, it's going to be amazing. If it doesn't work, hey, at least I tried something. And I think that's really important.
Yes, you please in the front row.
My name is Igor. Thank you for lecture. What do you think about artificial intelligence? Do you think it is dangerous or not?
So, artificial intelligence, dangerous or not? I don't know. I don't think so, but again, I'm always optimistic. There are some concerns, I think, that we can have about, particularly when we get to human-level AI and singularity type of things, where we really start thinking about super intelligence, far more intelligent than human beings. This could be the most amazing, wonderful thing ever. But it could also be the end of us. So it's really hard to think about. I think in the short run, the amount of positive benefits are so enormous that we should be very happy that these innovations are going on. I think we're seeing amazing breakthroughs in biochemistry, for example, that is driven by the availability of massive amounts of computational power. I think when we look at some of the really interesting stuff that's going on with deep learning algorithms and so on. I mean, I think even, it sounds quite funny to say, but I mean, the number of people who are killed in automobile accidents is a scandal that we've all grown up used to it. Like, we just think, oh yeah, people die in car wrecks all the time. This is unnecessary. This will stop. We'll have a tiny fraction of those accidents very soon, which is an amazing positive outcome for human beings. And it only can come about through not full human level AI, but quite intelligent responses. So, don't know. I watch it like everybody. So.
Right. Can we go please to the back? There's a gentleman. Yes, you at the very back. That gentleman there. No, with glasses. Thank you.
Джимми, здравствуйте, меня зовут Алексей.
Hello, Jimmy. My name is Alexei. I said you were saying that thanks to the technological development and automation, a lot of people will become jobless. And an occupation where a modicum of intelligence is required, or something that is done manually, they will be, obsolete. And in Russia, I've heard that there are some initiatives on requalification of people, so that people would get a new education, so that they will not be unemployed. So how is it going in the US and in England? Do you have similar programs on free, education on, for example, programming courses or similar professions that are very, relevant today? And should private business invest in that? Free courses, free programs.
So this goes back to the question about lorry drivers. In Russia, the gentleman says there's a state-sponsored program which helps these people learn new skills and get new knowledge. Are there similar programs, he asks, in America and in Britain? If there aren't, should there be? Should the government be doing that? Or should private individuals, perhaps private entrepreneurs, be doing that?
Yeah, so I don't know. I would say yes, there are some programs for retraining in both the US and UK. Probably not big enough. I'm not an expert on that. And I actually think this is one of these complicated areas where I think that public policy does need to take this into account, that we do need to think about the strategies of educational funding in terms of thinking a lot more about transitional ages of life. Traditionally we get lots of funding for children. We shouldn't stop doing that. Educating children is important, and a lot less funding later in life. And I think we need to think more about that. But I also think this is the responsibility of entrepreneurs and companies. I think there's new solutions that are needed. One of the things that I think is really important that governments are not going to be good at is we need to reduce the cost of education. And we know that government institutions are very bad at reducing the cost of things, and the funding model just encourages everybody to spend more money and make sure you run out of money by the end of the year so you can ask for more the next year. And that's not a very entrepreneurial way of thinking. And I think there'll be big opportunities, because anytime that you have people who understand a big change is coming in the future and they need to be ready for it and they need to invest in themselves, they are going to be willing to do that. And I think there's some opportunities there. But I don't have... it's not fair, really, to raise a problem and say, I've raised the problem and I don't have a solution, but I don't have a solution. So I think we all have to think about that.
Right. Can we have a question from the front here?
Hello. Check. So, since we're talking about future here, I have a question. What are you going to do in 10 years' time? And how are we going to change, how the society will change, maybe thanks to your projects, or maybe due to technological transformation, in 10 to 50 years, how the future will look like?
Where do you see yourself in 10 years, and where do you see the society and the world in 10 years?
Okay, I don't know where I see myself in 10 years. I don't know. I'm 52, so I'll be... Well, I'm not 52 yet. Wait a minute. It's not my birthday yet. I'm 51. Soon to be 52. So I'll be 62, so kind of young still, so hopefully healthy. I don't know. I live in London. I like London, so I don't know. I'll probably be either giving a speech about the amazing success of Wiki Tribune and how it's transformed journalism, or I'll be adding a slide to my speech on failure saying, oh, here was my next good idea that didn't work. So we'll see. In terms of society, I mean, I think there are a lot of things that are really hard to predict. And I think one of the things that I always talk about, so if we think about the technology of the interstate highway system, and the cars and transport. Everyone understood as they were building this system of highways in the US that it would be transformative for trucking and shipping and for cars. But what most people didn't foresee is the impact that it would have in the form of McDonald's. Because people were suddenly able to travel more, McDonald's as a nationwide and now global brand suddenly had a meaning, because if you can travel more, you think, oh, well, where should I eat? And okay, I'll just stop at McDonald's because I know exactly what I'm going to get, and it's fine, and it's not great, but it's okay. And so when we think about a lot of the transitions around driverless cars, the easy things to understand are, oh wow, truck drivers they've got a big problem ahead. But what are all the other changes? How will having driverless cars, how will that impact the way we send children to school? How will it impact food delivery? How will it impact, all kinds of different changes? Will we no longer need parking in the middle of cities? And so suddenly we'll turn the parking lots into green space or parks, or maybe more skyscrapers or something like this. All those second order transitions are the hard ones to really think about, because they're really difficult to know all of the shifts in cost structures and things that will lead to new opportunities and new problems. So I don't know.
Right, can we go the other side, just for a change? The gentleman in the white t-shirt there.
Здрасте.
Hello.
Когда создавалась Википедия,
So when you created Wikipedia, the initial version of the engine, were you the programmer or just as a businessman who ordered the product? And another personal question, what operational system do you use?
One, when Wikipedia was first being set up, did you do any coding, or did you just do the philosophy behind it? And question two is, which operating system do you use?
Right. So yes, in the early days of Wikipedia, I did coding. When we first launched, I downloaded a very, very simple wiki package written in Perl called usemodwiki. It was so simple, you could set your username, but there was no such thing as a password, so anybody could pretend to be anybody, which obviously wasn't sustainable. And also, if you're technology savvy, the search engine for Wikipedia basically was just grepping through text files, so just looking for strings in text files. This very quickly got to be very slow, so I wrote the first search engine to search for things in Wikipedia using a binary tree and blah, blah, blah. So I am a coder, but not a very good one. I've always said that. I'm not a software engineer by any means. I'm just self-taught programmer, and I wouldn't consider myself any kind of a path breaker in terms of coding knowledge or anything like that. But I'm all right. I'm tech savvy. And I use Mac OS X. I used to use exclusively Linux, desktop Linux, KDE, and I hated Windows, so as soon as I could get away from that, I was very happy. I'm very happy on the command line. I still do stuff on the command line. I use Emacs for editing. But what happened is I visit, and I didn't have a positive view of Macs. I just thought, it's dumbed down, it's too, And then I visited my father-in-law, and I opened up a terminal window, and I typed Emacs, and I'm like, oh my God, a computer that actually works. And I also have all the Unix stuff underneath. I was very happy with that, and I've never switched back. Recently, I set up a computer with Ubuntu, and I ran into very quickly, I found myself Googling error messages to try to get my Wi-Fi card to work, and I was like, I know why I stopped doing this, and I had hoped it would have gotten better. To be fair, I didn't select the hardware, I just tried it on a hardware. So anyway, I'm a big fan of open source software, and would happily switch back, but it's still a little too hard to use, and that's many years in, so I don't know what the answer is there.
So why is open source software not working, but open source knowledge you would argue is? What's the difference there?
Well, to be clear, open source software is working. I mean, it's really the backbone. No, it works far better in the server environment. I mean, certainly you wouldn't set up a server farm and try to run Windows or I mean, you're definitely going to use open source software for that sort of thing. It's much more robust and more secure, and I can sing the praises of open source software. Where open source software has been weaker is in consumer-facing products, and I think the reasons for that are complicated, and I don't have any genius insights. I can just repeat what a lot of people believe. The people who are doing open source software coding like interesting intellectual problems, and making the user interface a little bit nicer and easier for people to use just isn't that fun, and it hasn't attracted enough attention. And there's also generally not a business model around making that happen. So there's been some great stuff. I mean, Ubuntu, GNOME, KDE, there is great stuff out there, but to get to that level of polish and simplicity has been very difficult. And there's a lot of reasons. I mean, one of the reasons is the people who are most actively involved are people who are very comfortable going and configuring everything. And so oftentimes in the open source world, the answer to any kind of debate is just turn it into an option. Oh, you think it should be this way, I think it should be that way, we'll just make it an option. Most people don't want options, they just want software that works, and so that's been a complicated thing, but I don't know.
Yes, you, sir.
Кто конкуренты Википедии в мире?
So who are the competitors of Wikipedia in the world?
Скажите еще раз.
Кто конкуренты у Википедии в мире?
Who are the competitors of Wikipedia?
Other than in the sense that everything on the internet competes with everything else, competing for people's attention, we don't really have any direct competitors. So obviously the traditional encyclopedias, you might think of them as competitors, but they're kind of irrelevant to us today. Other quality sources of information, you might think of them as competitors, but because we're a community, we just don't think about competition very much. We build something that we like and we hope people enjoy it, and that's kind of the end of it.
Yes, you, sir, in the front row, please.
For time you spent with us today. And I have two questions, basically. The first one is, on some point you mentioned that you was on the board with Quora, right? With guys with D'Angelo and on Quora website. Yeah? Are you still on board there? And do you still use the Quora website personally, or it's someone behind you? And the second question is, can you remember the best, the best ever experience related to your management or your time managing Wikipedia for all this long period of time, and what the experience was? Thanks.
Sure, yeah, great. So Quora is a very popular question and answer website, which I use myself, and I love it, and I answer questions there. I actually have more followers on Quora than I do on Facebook or Twitter. And I say, including, yes, and the reason is because I feel like I'm not a 140 character kind of guy. I like a question where I can answer in a paragraph or 3 paragraphs. So, and I really enjoyed the user interface, and also think they've done a really good job of creating a nice community. So I never feel like, on Twitter, you go on Twitter and you write something, and half the time some obnoxious troll is going to insult you, and you just have to get used to it. And in Quora, I never see this. People are very nice. They may disagree with you, but they have a lovely, nice culture, and so I do like it. And I do it personally. I don't have any social media person. The same for my Twitter, Facebook. I just don't. I'm an internet user, so I just type what I think, And then the second question was?
What was the second? Your best experiences?
Oh, best experience. I mean, for me, a couple of the experiences that have been really, really meaningful were when Wikipedia went dark to protest SOPA and PIPA. And then last week, we had a fantastic experience. There was a European Union copyright directive, which is partly quite good and partly very bad. And we managed to turn the tide by asking people to contact European Parliament. And they voted no, which didn't kill the whole thing. The no vote just means now they'll have a proper debate in Parliament. And since then, whereas before we were not being listened to about our concerns, now suddenly the politicians are listening to us, so we think we can find a compromise that works. And so that feels really good, because we are not like lobbyists and we don't have money to influence politics. The only thing we have is that the public loves Wikipedia, and if we say to the public, we think this is a problem, then they respond, and that's really great. And so we try to be very responsible with that voice. It's not for Wikipedia to get involved in broad politics. It's we're neutral. This is not for Wikipedia. But if it's about openness, freedom of expression, sensible copyright rules. This is core to everything we believe in, and so we do take action. And for me, it's a great moment. I have a little office. My personal office is just a studio flat in London. So I have this tiny little room, and I've got a refrigerator, and I sit there by myself and I type. And to think, everybody was saying to me, this is definitely going to pass. There's no way to stop it. There's too many powerful interests who want to see this get through. And for me to start typing to my friends in Wikipedia and 3 weeks later having Parliament vote my way, wow, that's an amazing experience. It was lovely. Not that I'm responsible for it. Lots of people were, but to be a part of something like that.
You, sir, just there. Yes.
Thank you for coming. My name is Flavian. And my question is, as you have said, you tend to be a pathologic optimist. And my question is, what are your favorite description of nearest future, non-fictional or fictional?
What's your description of the future? I think we've sort of touched on that, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, we've sort of touched on that. I mean, I am optimistic. I think that there's a lot of amazing technology that I'm really excited about. I'm really excited about gene editing. I think this is going to be an amazing positive benefit in health. And a lot of the technology that we need for extending life and extending happy, healthy life is coming in a good way, and I think we're making more progress than we had made in a long time past. Another little element, this is one I just was reading about the other day. Somebody at Google said to me, and I can't find a source for this other than someone at Google, but I believe it. They said that Google Translate has made more progress in the last 6 months than since it began through deep learning technology. I did find a couple of news stories saying, wow, Google Translate is much better than it used to be. But that's a subjective thing to say, more progress in 6 months than but if you try Google Translate today, it's so much better than it was even a year ago. And that kind of thing really excites me because I think, as we know, you heard me talk about, here's some negative news stories about China. And of course, in the West, we hear all kinds of terrible things about Russia. And I'm sure, well, I can't read the Russian media. I don't know what Russians are saying. I don't know what the Russian media is saying. I can't go on a message board and talk to Russians unless they speak English, but that's a smaller group. But if we can get real machine translation so that people can really listen to each other and really understand each other, wow, I'm so optimistic about that. Because I travel all over the world. I meet people. There's, almost everybody in the world is nice. Maybe some of them are not so nice, but most normal people are actually perfectly nice people. And you get this demonization from politicians that's very dangerous. And I think the more we can enhance person-to-person understanding of each other, that's really something to be optimistic. So in that sense, I'm optimistic about the future. But then another darker view is to say, wow, in the last 5 years, the rise of fake news, the rise of politics of hatred and opposition has really gotten much worse. We're seeing in the UK, we're going through all these debates about Brexit, which, whatever your views are on Brexit, I think most people can say the debate hasn't been healthy. It hasn't been a serious, thoughtful debate. It's a lot of rhetoric and anger. And so then that would make you less optimistic. You would say, oh dear, social media is destroying the fabric of society and causing everyone to hate each other. Okay, I don't believe that, but I'm worried about it a little bit anyway. And so I think the most important thing is the future is ours to make, and we have a responsibility to make it well, if we can.
We've got time for a couple more questions. So, you, sir, just there.
Спасибо большое. Меня зовут Сергей.
Thank you very much. My name is
Может
Sergey.
быть, мой вопрос будет продолжением
Maybe my question
предыдущего.
will be a continuation of the previous question, but
Вы сказали очень много хорошего
you've said a lot
о
of
будущем.
good things about the future,
Наверняка у вас есть и какие-то
and
экзистенциальные
probably you have some
опасения,
existential
тех опасностей,
concerns
которые нас ждут в будущем.
that
Я
await
могу
us in
чуть-чуть
the
пояснить.
future.
Я, как
Let
видите,
me
мне даже
clarify.
62 года, а еще
I'm not
побольше.
62,
Я
I'm
помню,
even
как нам
more.
обещали через
I
20
remember
лет
when
коммунизм,
we were
и все
promised
будет,
communism in 20 years, and we will be, all artists, and everything will be done by machines. Then we were promised the rise of democracy and free entrepreneurship, and we got a crisis. We don't have as many social lifts as before. So, what things concern you?
About a bright future. You spoke about the future from your perspective as an optimist. Are there any threats which you see in the future, and are there any things which you fear about the future?
Yeah, I mean, one of the concerns that I have is that the rise of nationalism around the world, which is in many, many countries, and the rise of demonizing other people and other cultures, is giving rise to a greater demand for laws around censorship and blocking information that people don't like. And I fear that. I think that's a real problem. I mean, Wikipedia has been banned in China for quite some time, and we've had an up and down relationship in China. But in the last year, we've been blocked in Turkey, and that's a problem because, you know, the Turkish Wikipedia is great, and there's a lot of great people in Turkey, and we're missing that input in the world. And to the extent that we begin to see this kind of breaking down of and siloing of information, I think this is a threat because people, you know, will turn inward and neglect the fact that we're all humans on this tiny planet, and I think that's super important. So I do worry about certain things like that, about the breakdown of the openness of the internet, because I think it's still a great positive force that we should really be passionate about defending. The open, free communication online is amazing.
The lady at the back there. Yes, you.
Thank you for food for thought. I'm curious which professional qualities you would name as the greatest investments in this technologized world. Which professional qualities would be investments?
Professional qualities.
Yes.
Yes. So I think we can think about this in different ways. I think when we think about educating children, I think one of the most important things we should invest in is teaching them research skills and how to learn new things, as opposed to just having them memorize things or learn things. And then when we move forward into the university level, I think everybody at the university level should be thinking, I may not be in the same career in 20 years' time. And that's not true for everyone, but for many, many people this will be true. And so the old idea, which everyone knows is dead, but it still carries on, that you go through school and then you train for one profession and then you go do that profession and then you retire, is less and less likely to be true. And even if you're in some way in the same profession, it's going to change dramatically and dynamically. So just to give one example, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the world of the law, the work of attorneys and legal research, because a lot of that is being automated in new ways with machine learning techniques. Obviously, we're not going to replace the whole of what lawyers do with machine learning techniques, but a lot of the work that people do is going to change dramatically in the amount of technology they have. So I think at all levels, this investing in resilience, investing in saying, I need to make sure that I know how I can change things. And then, of course, when we think about some things that are permanent and universal, would be things about collaborating with others and management of collaboration and management as a understanding other people and how to help them develop and become more productive and more successful in their careers. It has always been valuable and now will remain valuable. That's not about technology, that's just about people. And it's, you know, and I can say this with some knowledge because I'm a terrible manager. I've never learned how to be a good manager. I'm too nice. I never make people do things. I just say, oh, that sounds great, do whatever you like. Which turns out not to be the best way to get work done. But
I think we still have a little bit more time, so let's take a couple of questions from this side. Yes, you, sir, in the front row there.
Hey, Jenny, thanks for coming. My name is Jim Kolesnikov. I'm from Singularity University, sure you know. And so we're so excited about your work and about your vision. And we're so interesting. How about communication with local community about how to make your decision dream come true? So if you use Facebook Messenger, maybe you can watch, I send you a message and we talk later. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good. Okay, one more. Yes, you just there. Thank you. Sorry, I actually meant the lady there, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for coming. And maybe I would like to reconnect with the digital transformation topic again. So one of the challenges I've been facing personally is the saturation of data, like with all the social media, networking, constant flow of news and everything. And then this idea of blockchain, that every single thing will be like trackable. It won't, like, there's no way to hide anything. I feel like, I mean, maybe it's just one of the ideas that it will create some sort of a denial against that, some you know, kind of protest against this like visibility and saturation, and to the point that people like would want to be internet free, or you know, develop some kind of opposition towards it. So what's your take on that? Is that really a challenge, or what do you think of it? Thanks.
I mean, I think it's hugely important. So now, just speaking on a very personal level, you know, I think it. I think that finding a space in your life to be away from technology, and by that, it also means being away from other people. It's not the technology so much, it's just like the ongoing flow of what my friends are doing and what everybody's up to and answering in social media and Twitter and everything that you could follow. To just step back from that and take some time for peace and quiet and a walk in the countryside is super important. I'm really intrigued by you know, Arianna Huffington has this new app called, is it called Thrive? Anyway, I think Thrive. And you download the app to your phone, and then it has settings, and you can block yourself from various social media and set parameters and times. And I think that's really interesting, because I think one of the things that I think a lot about, and I wish I knew more about brain science to understand it more, I don't think I'm speaking nonsense though, is that there's a difference in your kind of highest order human mind, where you make plans and you think for the future and you're rational and you say, this is what I want my life to be like, versus the more animal or reptilian mind, which says, ooh, I'm going to click that. Ooh, what? There's something, headline, I've got to see that. And that struggle is one that humans have always faced, between being thoughtful and reflective and then following your impulses. But now it's in our pockets all the time. And I think that's really important, to say, hey, I really love social media, I love Instagram, I love following my friends, but if I'm doing it all the time, that's probably not really what I want to do. But what's great about an app like this is that at that moment of thought and reflection, you can actually do something that your later self will go, I want to go on Instagram, but it's blocked right now, but okay, that's actually what I want, so it's better. Whereas if you don't have a blocking mechanism, then you know, so I don't know. But I think it's really important. I find one of the things that, you know, I'm a parent and I have 2 small children, and I find I have a struggle, like I think a lot of parents have, which is to put the phone away and play with the children at breakfast time is really important. And in fact, it hit home very much. We were on vacation with the children, and we asked the little ones, what was your favorite part, right, of the vacation, or what would you like better for our next vacation? And the 4-year-old said her favorite part was the ice cream, and what she would like better on the next vacation is more ice cream. Okay, this is a 4-year-old's view of the world. The 7-year-old, though, said, I forget what she liked the best, and what would you like better? And she said, I just wish we could have more time where you and Daddy aren't both on your phone. And the child said this, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so terrible. So this is a parent thing, but I think it's true for all kinds of relationships, to just say, actually, I'm going to put my phone away and spend time doing something that's not technology. I think it's really helpful. So.
Thank you, Jimmy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your questions.
Lovely. Great.
I just want to say that the next event as part of this forum is taking place here on the 30th of July. It'll be a lecture entitled The Digital Evolution of Enterprises, and it'll be delivered by Charles Adler, who is the founder and former CEO of Kickstarter. With this, thank you very much and have a very good night. Thank you.